Chapter 2867. Promotion to Tier 5. Although Feng had never tried to create a personalized mana body, he was very confident of success, now that he had grasped the basic use of mana's various elements and his mana body had reached a 120% completion rate. After spending close to an hour inside the statue room, Feng finished constructing a brand new mana body. Simultaneously, the sound of a system notification entered his ears. System. The strength of the constructed mana body is at 144% of your current mana body. It is not at the Tier 5 standard. Feng revealed a wry smile as he looked at the system notification. Sure enough, constructing a Tier 5 mana body isn't easy. In his opinion, the new mana body he constructed was perfect. He had thoroughly implemented the basic properties of the various elements of mana into his mana body. He had even built an elemental magic array for each element, making it much easier to manipulate the ambient mana. Hence, he never thought that the strength of the new mana body would be at only 144% of his current mana body. From what he heard in his previous life, the requirement for the constructed Tier 5 mana body would depend on the rank of the player's existing mana body. The higher the rank, the lower the requirement. Take the gold mana body, for example. One would need to construct a mana body that was at least 300% stronger to meet the Tier 5 mana body standard. On the other hand, a bronze mana body's owner would need to reach 500% to get promoted to Tier 5. This was why expert players needed to secure the best mana body possible at Tier 3. This decision didn't just relate to the strength of one's mana. It also served as a massive hurdle to reaching Tier 5. If I didn't meet the requirement even with 144%, it seems I'll need to reach at least 200% to get promoted to Tier 5 with an epic mana body. After pondering for a moment, Feng took out the Sword Saint's legacy he had obtained in the ancient god's domain. He then began accepting the legacy guidance in silence. The mana body he constructed just now was already the limit of his current abilities. In his opinion, there were 3 possible reasons behind his failure to meet the requirements. The first was that his control over mana was insufficient. The second was that his understanding of mana was insufficient. The third was that his understanding of mana bodies was insufficient. Feng felt that his control over and understanding of mana had already reached the limits of Tier 4. It should be impossible to improve on them any further. Not to mention, the Dragon Phantom in the trial had praised his level, and even stated that some Tier 5 dragons might not be able to rival him in these 2 aspects. Hence, these 2 aspects were unlikely to be his stumbling block. In that case, the problem should lie with his poor understanding of mana bodies. Meanwhile, solving this problem was simple. Previously, he had refrained from accepting the Sword Saint's legacy guidance because he was afraid of wasting it. Back then, he felt that his foundation was still lacking, and that he still needed to accumulate more strength. The stronger he became, the greater his harvest from the legacy guidance. However, his foundation had now grown so sturdy that even Tier 5 adult dragons might not be a match for him. It was the perfect moment for him to accept the Sword Saint's knowledge. Following this, time passed rapidly inside the statue room. A flood of information kept pouring into Feng's mind. The more information he browsed through, the brighter his eyes became. Thanks to this information, many of his questions had gotten answered. He also grew increasingly mesmerized by the Sword Saint's knowledge. After the legacy guidance was over, Feng stared at the ancient beast sculpture idly, his mind immersed in the knowledge he gained. While Feng quietly processed the Sword Saint's legacy guidance, a commotion raged in Zero Wing's guild cities. Just a moment ago, Zero Wing had announced that it would open Zero Wing City to the public. All players could teleport to Zero Wing City via Sky Spring City and enter it from the Arctic Canyon. Everyone who received this piece of news found it to be unbelievable. Awesome. This is great. I heard that you could raise your training efficiency by several times inside Zero Wing City. I never thought that Zero Wing would open such an amazing place to the public. That's not all of it. Did you see the levels of Zero Wing's members? Not that long ago, I was at roughly the same level as their Tier 3 members. Now they're at least 3 levels above me. The grinding speed in the Arctic Canyon is simply ridiculous. Nowadays, No player on the eastern continent was unaware of Zero Wing City's existence. However, as Zero Wing had reserved the city for its exclusive use, everyone not affiliated with the guild could only watch and envy from the sidelines. Even the various superpowers were helpless against Zero Wing City. Now that Zero Wing City is open to the public, how could they not feel excited? Less than half an hour after Zero Wing's announcement, practically every native player and player force on the eastern continent had found out about it. Fire Wing Empire Secret Pavilion's headquarters. As the most well-informed transcendental organization in God's domain, the Secret Pavilion was one of the first guilds to learn of Zero Wing City's public opening. It had even found out detailed information, such as Zero Wing City's entrance fee pricing and current player population. Uncle Yuan, it seems Zero Wing finally plans on giving its all. Purple Jade smiled as she read the detailed report in her hands. Looking at Yuan Tiexin, she said, "This development will probably make the eastern continent's superpowers pretty anxious." At this time, Purple Jade's aura had already undergone a massive transformation. Not only did she give off an otherworldly vibe, but she also exuded an indescribable feeling of sharpness. She was now a level 153, Tier 4 Sword Emperor. The mana she radiated even appeared somewhat misty. If Feng were to see her now, he would be surprised. Zero Wing's development has reached a bottleneck. If the War of Worlds did not take place, it might have been able to continue developing quietly for some time. While sorting through the reports spread across his desk, Yuan Tiexin was slightly surprised when reading the news on Zero Wing. However, now that the Outer World players have intruded into the eastern continent, Zero Wing has to open Zero Wing City to acquire even more resources if it wants to make any further progress. However, it is also a risky move, given Zero Wing's current state. I initially thought Zero Wing would maintain a low profile for a while longer. Black Flames opening the city as soon as he returned was beyond my expectations. I can't help thinking that he is rushing things a little too much. Yuan Tiexin did not doubt that Feng had opened Zero Wing City to the public because of the Outer World players' invasion. However, while doing so would allow Zero Wing City to develop rapidly, it would also turn the city into an eyesore. The Outer World superpowers were not as easy to deal with as the Eastern continent's native superpowers. Not to mention, the Outer World superpowers definitely would not wish to see the remnant forces of the native superpowers they defeated flocking to Zero Wing's banner and creating a colossal native power. Previously, the Outer World superpowers had refrained from targeting Zero Wing because the latter had always operated like a turtle, limiting its members' activity to the vicinity of its strongholds. With Zero Wing's guild cities and mobile fortresses' immense defensive capabilities, devouring the guild was a very challenging proposition. The guild cities of other superpowers posed much easier targets. However, now that Zero Wing had fully opened Zero Wing City to the public, even a fool could foretell the consequences of this action. With the city's massive advantages, Zero Wing would become the strongest and largest guild on the eastern continent. Moreover, it wouldn't take long for this future to come to fruition. Given this situation, although Zero Wing was a tough nut to crack, the Outer World superpowers would still choose to annihilate Zero Wing first for the sake of their future. However, unlike Yuan Tiexin, not only did Purple Jade not feel confused by this situation, but it had even ignited her fighting spirit. Uncle Yuan, since you're free right now, why don't we go take a look at Zero Wing City? I've been thinking of visiting Guild Leader Black Flame. I've improved a lot after returning from that place, but I haven't had a chance to test myself. I can use this chance to ask Guild Leader Black Flame for some guidance, and see which one of us has made greater improvements during this period. After she returned from her training, nobody among the Secret Pavilion's younger generation could match her. Since she had always set Feng as her target, she was very curious to see whether she could now defeat him and become God's domain's #1 swordsman. All right. Since you wish to go, I'll go with you. Yuan Tiexin revealed a bitter smile as he took in Purple Jade's spirited look. She had been restless ever since completing her training. However, he also felt that Feng would be a good opponent for the current Purple Jade. Afterward, Yuan Tiexin and Purple Jade departed the Secret Pavilion's headquarters and teleported to Sky Spring City. While the eastern continent was in an uproar over Zero Wing City's opening, inside the City Lord's mansion of Zero Wing City, Feng's eyes opened abruptly. Amazing! As expected of a complete legacy guidance from an ancient sword saint. After processing the sword saint's legacy guidance, Feng finally understood what exactly a complete legacy guidance was. He also understood why Fire Dance would make such significant improvements after experiencing the legacy guidance. The legacy guidance described the properties and usage methods of the various elements of mana in detail, and provided a comprehensive introduction to the components and basic applications of the mana body. Although the information provided mainly targeted the swordsman class, it was also beneficial to the other classes. This was especially true for the information on the mana body's components. Of course, if one lacked a good understanding of the fundamental properties of mana's various elements, one would have difficulty understanding all of the information provided. Naturally, one's improvements would also be limited. This was because all of the mana body's basic applications mentioned in the legacy guidance required familiarity with the various elements of mana. My previous considerations for the mana body were too arbitrary. Moreover, they were all modifications based on my existing mana body, when the Tier 5 mana body is essentially something completely different. When Feng thought about the mana body he previously created, he couldn't help laughing at his ignorance. Why were Tier 5 entities so much more powerful than Tier 4 entities? It was because Tier 5 existences possess life ratings far superior to Tier 4 existences. The two couldn't even be considered the same type of creature. Yet he had foolishly tried to use his Tier 4 mana body as a base for his Tier 5 mana body. His idea was fundamentally flawed. Another reason contributing to a Tier 5 existence's strength was their powerful mana. The mana flowing within their bodies was no longer gaseous or misty. Instead, it was liquid. Hence, when constructing a Tier 5 mana body, one had to liquefy their mana. If one couldn't achieve such mana, constructing a Tier 5 mana body would naturally be impossible. After thinking up to this point, Feng began his second attempt at constructing his Tier 5 mana body. Liquefying one's mana might be incredibly difficult for others, but it wasn't an impossible task for a Grandmaster Magician like Feng. All he needed to do was integrate a magic array that condensed mana within his mana body. Moreover, he had even identified the magic array for this job. The 12-array magic world. The 12-array magic world was an ancient magic array created by a saint. Although its simplicity meant even master magicians could learn it, Feng felt that this magic array was incredibly powerful, particularly its ability to improve the mana affinity of those within its range. At the very least, such a feat was still beyond him even now. Feng began trying to integrate the 12-array magic world with the mana body he constructed. 1 failure. 2 failures. 3 failures. Time passed rapidly as the number of failures piled up. After an unknown amount of time had gone by with success still nowhere in sight, Feng began to doubt his plan's feasibility. However, just when he considered giving up, read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU System. Congratulations! You have successfully constructed a new mana body. The constructed mana body's strength is at 336% of your current mana body, and has reached the Tier 5 standard. The created mana body is evaluated to be at the epic rank. Do you wish to replace your current mana body with it, and get promoted to Tier 5? A Tier 5 epic mana body? Feng was momentarily dumbfounded. He had known that so long as he succeeded, his personalized mana body wouldn't be of low quality. It would reach the gold rank at the very least. However, he never expected that integrating the 12-array magic world into his mana body would yield such an astonishing result. He immediately chose to replace his mana body without hesitation. He had created this mana body out of sheer luck. If he tried recreating it, he wouldn't necessarily achieve a similar standard. Hence, he naturally had to accept it. Chapter 2868. Sword Saint. When Feng chose to replace his existing mana body, the mana within the room practically vanished. His new mana body had drawn even the mana stored within the deep void. Like a hungry beast, his new mana body devoured the mana around it, nourishing itself continuously. This phenomenon lasted for more than a minute before it finally stopped, and the room's mana gradually recovered. Tier 5. So this is the power of Tier 5? When Feng sensed the frightening power his body exuded effortlessly and the indescribable feeling of omnipotence, he finally understood why even Tier 4 world creation experts couldn't defeat a bona fide Tier 5 existence. He also fully understood the strength and terror of Tier 5 existences. Compared to when he was a Tier 4, the mana flowing inside his mana body was many times denser. The volume of his mana had also increased by more than tenfold. Now even the world around him was having trouble holding his mana. If even the world of God's domain itself could not withstand the mana of a Tier 5 existence, there was no need to mention the small world created by a Tier 4 world creation expert. Moreover, this wasn't the only factor that made Tier 5 existences powerful. System. Congratulations. You have become a Tier 5 Blade Saint Sword Saint. All basic attributes plus 5,000. All resistances plus 500, mana recovery rate increased by 300%. All physical and magical attacks received that are below Tier 5 will be weakened by 40%. All basic attributes increased by 150%. Physique increased by 200%, and reaction speed improved by 100%. Rewarding 200 legacy skill points. He had received a flat increase of only 2,000 points to all basic attributes when he got promoted to Tier 4. Yet received a 5,000 point boost for reaching Tier 5. None of his weapons and equipment could provide such a significant amount of basic attributes, not to mention the massive boost to his physique. Right now, even if he replaced all his equipment with bronze equipment, he could still beat up a Tier 4 expert fully geared in epic equipment. In terms of basic attributes, he could match a Tier 4 expert with several pieces of fragmented legendary equipment. Only a legendary weapon could offset this difference. As for legendary equipment, the basic attributes provided would still be slightly insufficient to fill the gap. Of course, basic attributes didn't represent everything. If a Tier 4 expert's combat standards surpassed a Tier 5 expert's, the Tier 4 expert could still emerge victorious in a fight. With this power, I will have no problem fighting even Tier 5 NPCs. After seeing his basic attributes, Feng felt more confident about Zero Wing's future development. His strength and agility attributes both exceeded the 60,000 mark already. Typically, a Tier 4 Berserker fully geared in epic items would have only around 15,000 strength at level 150. And even if the Berserker possessed a top-tier fragmented legendary weapon, the Berserker would only have about 22,000 or 23,000 strength. As for NPCs, according to the research of players in his previous life, a level 180, Tier 5 NPC would have around 70,000 or 80,000 points in their main basic attributes. While Feng was still inferior to Tier 5 NPCs in basic attributes, this difference wasn't impossible to overcome. Moreover, now that he had reached Tier 5, every level up he achieved would significantly boost his basic attributes. With his current equipment, he could easily breach the 80,000 mark once he reached level 180. Not to mention, his combat standards were much superior to the average Tier 5 NPCs. Overall, he was already more than capable of contending with level 180, Tier 5 NPCs. Of course, while he might have the ability to fight Tier 5 NPCs, he wasn't so arrogant as to provoke Tier 5 NPCs. After all, he currently could cope with the most common Tier 5 NPCs, but if a Tier 5 NPC possessed even a single piece of legendary equipment, he would have to avoid them like the plague. It seems I'll have to get Fire and the others to search for some god crystals. In an era where gods had secluded themselves from the world, Tier 5 existences were indeed the apex combatants of God's domain. However, there were still significant differences even among Tier 5s. The possession of legendary weapons and equipment played a vital role in this difference. Only after obtaining a legendary weapon or equipment could a Tier 5 expert enter the leading echelon of Tier 5 existences and walk around God's domain without fear. Such a Tier 5 expert would be an invincible existence short of Tier 6 gods. However, if a Tier 5 expert did not own a legendary weapon or equipment, they would only be second-rate among Tier 5 existences, regardless of any heaven-defying combat standards. While they might be able to contend against Tier 5 experts belonging to the leading echelon, they would never be part of it. Indeed, the difference between having a legendary item, and not having one was precisely that massive. In the past, every Tier 5 expert capable of transcending tiers to fight Tier 6 God-ranked experts owned a legendary weapon or equipment, with some even having more than one. If Feng wanted to roam God's domain without fear, obtaining a legendary weapon or equipment was of utmost importance. After Feng familiarized himself with his Tier 5 mana body, he left the statue room. However, when he stepped into the City Lord's mansion's lobby, he was stupefied by the sight that greeted him. People crowded the room to capacity. Apart from the Zero Wing members maintaining order, the other players in the lobby were members of guilds and adventurer teams. These players were lined up in front of the service counters to rent either a shop or a private house in Zero Wing City. They had bloodshot eyes and frantic looks on their faces as they waited in line. Beat RIL/beat/B, if not for the 200 Tier 3 NPCs, 3 Tier 4 NPCs, and many Tier 3 members of Zero Wing maintaining order, a fight would have long since broken out in the lobby. Didn't I tell Liangjing to raise the rentals for the shops? Did she make a mistake? Feng found the scene very puzzling. Anyone who wasn't a fool could tell how popular Zero Wing City currently was. However, Zero Wing City had limited land. Even if it was now a main city, it still didn't have enough land to satisfy the eastern continent's entire player population. Hence, to maximize Zero Wing's profits, raising rentals was a must. Feng approached one of the service counters to inspect Zero Wing City's shop's rental prices. However, what he saw made him gasp. How ruthless is she? Even a small shop located in Zero Wing City's outer area had a rental of 3,000 magic crystals, and 600 gold per week, more than double the price Feng intended. The amount of magic crystals Liangjing charged was particularly maddening. Ever since the Outer World players invaded the eastern continent, magic crystal production had plummeted, and the various native powers had suffered immensely. In Feng's opinion, renting a small shop in the city's outskirts for 1,000 magic crystals would already be pushing the envelope. Liangjing's price of 3,000 magic crystals was no different from daylight robbery. As for the shops located on Zero Wing City's main street, the minimum price was 20,000 magic crystals. One couldn't even use coins to offset part of the rent. Moreover, one had to bid for these shops in an auction. Despite these cutthroat prices, players still filled the City Lord's mansion's lobby. Feng found this situation utterly unbelievable. For a moment, he even wondered if magic crystals had suddenly depreciated during his seclusion. Just when Feng thought of contacting Liangjing to ask her about Zero Wing City's situation, he suddenly received a call. The caller was none other than Liangjing. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Guild Leader, can I interrupt you for a moment? Liangjing asked anxiously. Did something happen to Zero Wing City? Feng asked strangely. No, it's just that the secret pavilion's people came to visit. Aside from them, 3 of the 5 great super guilds have sent representatives to us. There are a lot of them, and some of them don't seem to be here with kind intentions, Liangjing said nervously. They are waiting in the residence's reception room right now, and they say they must meet with you no matter what. The secret pavilion was a transcendental power, while the 5 great super guilds were godlike existences in the virtual gaming world. If news that 3 of the 5 great super guilds had arrived were to spread, it would cause a sensation. Alright, I got it. I'll head over now. Have them wait for a moment. Feng chuckled when he heard Liangjing's words, not at all surprised by this situation. After all, the current Zero Wing City was no ordinary city. What would be strange would be these titans of the gaming world not showing any reaction. He immediately left the City Lord's mansion and made his way to Zero Wing's residence. Chapter 2869, Apex Gathering. Zero Wing Residence, Top Floor Reception Room. As the primary guild residence of a main city, Zero Wing's guild hall was a 30-story tall building almost 200 meters high. One had an unobstructed view of the entire Zero Wing City, if one looked out the top floor reception room's windows. Since Zero Wing City was located in a snowland and backed by the endless sea, the view here was unique for players who often operated around NPC cities surrounded by greenery. Unfortunately, none of the dozen or so people currently seated in the reception room showed any interest in admiring this beautiful scenery. Instead, they focused on sizing up each other. Zero Wing City has attracted a lot of bigwigs. Yuan Tiexin was a little shocked as he observed the room's occupants. Mythology's Grand Elder Situ Qingtian, Netherworld Empire's Grand Elder Nether King Relos, and even the Solar Temple's Honorary Elder Qiang Tianhe. It seems these guilds are serious this time. 3 of the 5 great super guilds had sent representatives to Zero Wing City. Moreover, these representatives were all key figures in their respective guilds' management, individuals fully capable of making decisions on behalf of their respective guilds. Usually, meeting even one of these individuals would be challenging. Yet 3 of them had gathered in Zero Wing City. However, Yuan Tiexin's surprise didn't last too long. After all, Zero Wing had created too huge a scene this time. The 5 great super guilds could no longer ignore it. At this stage of the game, there was probably no guild uninterested in a teleportation array that could facilitate unrestricted travel between the 2 main continents. The ongoing War of Worlds only served to make this intercontinental teleportation array even more precious. If not for another important matter occupying the Secret Pavilion's guild leader, Yuan Tiexin wouldn't be the one sitting in this room, representing the Secret Pavilion. Netherworld Empire sure moved fast. It has been active only on the Western continent all this time, yet it sent an old guy like the Nether King here. Matt of Mythology said, surprise appearing in his eyes as he looked at a bald old man in a white robe. It hasn't been long since I last met him, yet this old guy's strength has already improved so much. The mana he's radiating has nearly doubled in density. I also see 2 new pieces of equipment on him. That's normal. He wouldn't have given Odin so much trouble if he hasn't made any significant improvements after all this time. Situ Qingtian, the white-haired old man seated beside Matt, said calmly. He then glanced at the masked young man standing behind Relos and continued. That masked kid behind Nether King though is quite something. Although I can't say for certain, he shouldn't be any weaker than Prosciutto. Surprised by Situ Qingtian's assessment, Matt looked toward the masked youth and asked, is he that strong? The silver ghost Prosciutto was already the strongest among Mythology's younger generation. Not only did he possess excellent equipment, but his mana body had even exceeded the 110% completion rate already. Now only a handful of people within the guild could defeat him. After hearing Situ Qingtian's assessment, Cold Shadow, who sat on the elderly man's other side, also looked at the masked youth in surprise. Situ Qingtian had instructed countless students, and his insight was many times superior to that of youngsters like Matt and herself. Since Situ Qingtian had given the masked youth such an evaluation, the youth definitely couldn't be underestimated. It's not just that masked kid. The long-haired kid sitting beside Qiang Tianhe isn't any weaker either, Situ Qingtian said, smiling as he looked at the long-haired, male youth seated some distance away from him. I have to say that times have changed. He looks to be around 26 or 27 years old, yet he has already reached the peak of the domain realm's 2nd step. It's been 3 decades since I last saw such talent. When Situ Qingtian finished speaking, Cold Shadow was surprised again. Even now, she was barely touching the fringes of the domain realm's 2nd step, and it would still take a lot of time and effort for her to reach it, let alone climb to the peak of the 2nd step. Experts capable of reaching this step were as rare as a phoenix's feather in the virtual gaming industry. If such an expert could take one more step forward, they would become an existence standing at the very apex of God's domain. Situ Qingtian did not lower his voice when speaking. He also didn't talk through a private channel. Hence, every Tier 4 expert in the reception room heard his words loud and clear. B-R-O-0/B, all of the youths present, including Purple Jade and Netherworld Empire's masked youth, turned reflexively to look at the long-haired youth carrying the blood-red greatsword, their eyes full of fighting spirit. Situ Qingtian, you're still the same gossipy bastard as before, Qiang Tianhe said, glaring at Situ Qingtian. While our kid has indeed made a breakthrough recently, do you think I can't see through that young lass beside you? If I'm not mistaken, she has at least 4 fragmented legendary items on her, right? As soon as Qiang Tianhe finished speaking, everyone's head snapped toward Cold Shadow. The masked youth and the long-haired youth in particular looked at her with fiery gazes. Nowadays, epic weapons and equipment were a lot more common in God's domain. Fragmented legendary items, on the other hand, were still incredibly rare even for the various superpowers. Even in Netherworld Empire and Solar Temple, less than 30% of their Tier 4 experts had even one fragmented legendary item, while their Grand Elders would be fortunate to have one or two fragmented legendary items. Yet, Qiang Tianhe had revealed that Cold Shadow owned at least 4 fragmented legendary items. How could they not envy her? After reaching their level, every fragmented legendary item could provide them with significant improvements. The total improvement 4 fragmented legendary items could provide would be massive. This old bastard. Cold Shadow glared at Qiang Tianhe. A display of talent would, at most, make others envious. However, weapons and equipment were a different story. Unlike talent, others could snatch these items. With her current strength, she wouldn't stand a chance if 2 or more of the people present attacked her. After all, every person in the room was a bona fide monster. Looking at Cold Shadow, Qiang Tianhe smiled and asked, "What is it? Do you wish to take action, young lass?" Qiang Tianhe. Glaring at Qiang Tianhe coldly, Situ Qingtian threatened, "Do you think we won't dare make a move?" Immediately, the atmosphere in the room solidified, an indescribable sense of coldness spreading throughout the room. At this development, the members of Mythology and Solar Temple instinctively gripped their weapons. If an ordinary Tier 4 expert were to stand in this heavy atmosphere, they would most likely break out in a cold sweat and flee the scene immediately. What rotten luck! Just what are these people trying to do? Yuan Tiexin grew a little nervous as he looked at the members of the 2 super guilds. Mythologies and Solar Temple's Tier 4 experts were far from ordinary. This was especially true for Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe. A fight between them would be a calamity. The others in the room might even become collateral damage if things got too out of hand. To make matters worse, Netherworld Empire's members also showed signs of restlessness. Evidently, if Mythology and Solar Temple fought, Netherworld Empire wouldn't mind joining in the fray. Just as a fight was about to ensue, the woman standing by the room's door all this time suddenly stepped forward. She was none other than Fire Dance. At this time, not only was Fire Dance at level 155 already, but the quality of the mana she radiated was also much more powerful than when she first entered the statue room. Looking at the members of Mythology and Solar Temple, Fire Dance warned, "Everyone, this is Zero Wing's territory. Fighting is forbidden here. I ask you to show Zero Wing some respect." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU shows Zero Wing respect. Glancing at Fire Dance, Qiang Tianhe said nonchalantly, "Sure. As long as you can get Situ to shut up, I won't have any problems." Not one to fall behind, Situ Qingtian looked at Fire Dance and said, "Young lady, this old man isn't trying to disrespect Zero Wing, but Qiang Tianhe has gone too far. So long as you can get that old ghost to apologize to us, we won't take any direct action." The 2 old men's rejoinders rendered Yuan Tiexin and Purple Jade speechless. Fire Dance was indeed powerful, but she was still slightly weaker than the 2 old men. At most, she could contend against the younger generation of Mythology and Solar Temple. Hence, it was impossible for her to silence the 2 guilds all by herself. Moreover, based on the words spoken by Qiang Tianhe and Situ Qingtian, the 2 of them were clearly trying to make a show of power to Zero Wing. If Fire Dance failed to deal with this situation appropriately, she would make a fool of herself and Zero Wing. However, without any hesitation, Fire Dance calmly told the 2 old men, "If you 2 refuse to give up, then please leave Zero Wing City. Zero Wing does not welcome such guests." Chapter 2870. Feng's sword. Fire Dance's words resounded like thunder in the reception room, causing silence to descend on the room momentarily. Yuan Tiexin and Purple Jade also stared at Fire Dance reflexively. Has she lost her mind? Both Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe were big shots who spoke and acted on behalf of their respective guilds. The 2 had behaved rudely to show off their power and gain an advantage in their upcoming negotiations with Zero Wing, but Fire Dance's words cornered them. They couldn't back down without harming their reputation. If these two old men got angry for real, the consequences would be unimaginable. Although Zero Wing City had many Tier 4 players and NPCs defending it, if the two old men were intent on making a ruckus, it would take a long time for the city to suppress them. They might even escape capture. After all, this wasn't the first time they had done such a thing. Most importantly, the two of them represented Mythology and Solar Temple, two of the 5 great super guilds. Moreover, compared to the other 3, these 2 super guilds held far greater influence on the eastern continent. The 2 guilds might currently be incapable of retaliating against Zero Wing, but as holders of reserve seats for God's Domain's 12 great guilds, they could ruin the Twin Towers Kingdom and Starmoon Kingdom with just a word. Now that the Outer World's forces were rapidly expanding their influence, the NPC kingdoms and empires had limited combat power to spare. As a result, the united army these countries formed couldn't protect every kingdom on the continent. With the resumption of the war imminent, if Mythology and Solar Temple requested the NPC forces not to defend the Twin Towers Kingdom and Starmoon Kingdom, the 2 kingdoms would face swift destruction. Without the support of these 2 kingdoms, even if Zero Wing had Zero Wing City and the ability to teleport between the 2 continents, its income would still plummet. This was because most of the independent players and guild players visiting Zero Wing City could reach the city only via Sky Spring City's teleportation hall. It wasn't possible to teleport to Zero Wing City from other NPC cities. If Sky Spring City disappeared, these players would naturally lose the means to teleport to Zero Wing City. Meanwhile, Zero Wing couldn't garrison any other NPC city at this time. The special rights Zero Wing received from the War God's Temple as a reward from the reserve seat competition were a one-time privilege. If Zero Wing wished to garrison another NPC city, it would have to become a reserve for God's Domain's 12 great guilds. However, this wasn't possible right now. This was also precisely the reason Mythology, a guild that had been suppressing Zero Wing all this time, dared to come to Zero Wing's doorsteps and negotiate for partnership. The next moment, Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe turned to Fire Dance, a hint of coldness and playfulness in their eyes. Little girl, we traveled a long distance to come to negotiate a partnership with Zero Wing. Is this how Zero Wing treats its guests? Situ Qingtian asked as he visually inspected Fire Dance. Revealing a faint smile, he continued, if Zero Wing doesn't wish to partner with Mythology, Mythology will naturally find it unfortunate and frustrating. However, if Zero Wing comes across difficulties in the future, don't blame Mythology for not helping. Situ's words might not sound nice, but they are logical. Qiang Tianhe also looked at Fire Dance and said in a deep voice, we came here with kind intentions. Now that the Outer World's forces have invaded the Eastern continent, only by cooperating will we be able to stop their advance. If we separate on bad terms here, the Twin Towers Kingdom and Starmoon Kingdom will suffer. When Fire Dance heard the 2 elderly men's words, her complexion sank. She never expected the 2 of them to suddenly stand on the same side and work together to pressure Zero Wing. Seeing Fire Dance's grim expression, Situ Qingtian chuckled and said, I know you have your own difficulties, young lady. I'm sure you just made an unintentional mistake just now. Your words represent only your thoughts, right? At this time, Situ Qingtian did not dare to truly offend Zero Wing. After all, the benefits of Zero Wing City were too great to pass on. However, he still had to teach Fire Dance a lesson, and let her know that she couldn't provoke just anyone in God's domain. Qiang Tianhe, who remained seated, nodded and chimed in. That's right. There are some things you can't say arbitrarily, little girl. Elders like us might be able to ignore such a transgression, but if it were anyone else, your words would have severe consequences. Nether King Relos shook his head and sighed at this situation. Fire Dance was too young. Because of her inexperience, she had failed to notice that Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe had aimed for such an outcome right from the very beginning. They had deliberately made a commotion in the reception room in the hopes of hooking Fire Dance. Now that she had taken action on Zero Wing's behalf, she was bound to suffer humiliation. Driving away Mythology's and Solar Temple's members wouldn't be possible unless Zero Wing was willing to abandon the profits of the Twin Towers Kingdom and Starmoon Kingdom. Just when Fire Dance was at a loss as to what to say, The doors to the reception room suddenly opened. A tall figure then entered, looked at Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe, and demanded coldly, "Do you old fools think Zero Wing's main force commander cannot represent Zero Wing? Or do you think Zero Wing is a pushover? I can tell you now that Fire Dance's previous words represent my will. You may leave now." Feng did not speak loudly, but a bone-chilling cold enveloped the entire room at his words. Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe, in particular, were dumbfounded. Even Relos, who had been a spectator all this time, was stunned. He never thought that Feng would chase off mythology and Solar Temple without any negotiations. Guild leader Black Flame, aren't you going a little too far? Situ Qingtian asked in a cold voice. Our two guilds have come in sincerity. Are you going to abandon the Twin Towers Kingdom and Starmoon Kingdom just because of a little girl's few words? At this time, Qiang Tianhe interjected hurriedly. Guild leader Black Flame, must you take things so seriously? We were merely making a joke. Abandonment is a joke? Looking at the two elderly men before him, Feng sneered. You two think too highly of yourselves. I'll give you 5 seconds to leave. Otherwise, I'll send you back myself. Feng's words shocked everyone present once more. Is he really going to do that? When Yuan Tiexin looked at Feng, he felt that Feng was even crazier than Fire Dance. Fire Dance had merely acted to preserve Zero Wing's reputation. However, Feng was blatantly declaring war on mythology and Solar Temple. After this declaration, even if Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe previously wanted to pursue negotiations for a partnership, they wouldn't do so anymore. Good. Very good. Situ Qingtian suddenly smiled as he looked at Feng. This old man admires your will to make an enemy out of mythology and abandon 2 kingdoms. However, I'm curious to see how you plan on sending this old man back. After saying so, Situ Qingtian stood up and unsheathed the dark greatsword slung on his back. Simultaneously, not only did his body radiate a frightening aura, but the mana surrounding him also took on a near-liquid form, sparkling as it circled his silvery gray armor. Sensing the pressure he radiated, Fire Dance and the other youngsters in the room subconsciously took a step back. As expected of this old bastard, his mana body has broken through the 115% threshold. He can probably hold his own against even a superior mythic monster of the same level now. Relos was astonished when he sensed Situ Qingtian's unparalleled aura. Everyone has been saying that you are God's domain's strongest, guild leader Black Flame. This old man has been curious about the validity of this rumor for a long time now. After Situ Qingtian unleashed his aura, Qiang Tianhe, who sat nearby, also stood up and raised a crimson staff. The white robe he wore instantly transformed into a robe of flames, making it seem as if the god of fire had just descended to the mortal world. The aura he radiated was not the slightest bit inferior to Situ Qingtian's, and his level had even surpassed Situ Qingtian by 1. At level 154 already. Amazing! So these are the apex combatants of these 2 super guilds. Yuan Tiexin was astounded as he looked at Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe. Under normal circumstances, the average Tier 4 expert would have difficulty fleeing from a superior mythic monster of the same level, let alone fighting one. Yet, these 2 elderly men now radiated an aura rivaling that of a superior mythic monster of the same level. Their combat power ranked at the very top of God's domain at this stage of the game. Now even a dozen Tier 4 experts working together would most likely have difficulty suppressing Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe. Not to mention, the 2's combat standards were incredibly close to reaching the Beyond Domain realm. Let's see how you recover from this now, Black Flame. Cold Shadow, who now stood at a side, grew excited when she saw that Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe intended to take action. She might not know precisely how powerful Qiang Tianhe was, but she knew how powerful Situ Qingtian was. Moreover, it had been a long time since she had seen Situ Qingtian take action. With the 2 of them working together, even a monster like Feng would have difficulty defeating them within a short period. A fight between Feng, dubbed God's domain's strongest expert, and 2 legendary figures in the virtual gaming industry deserved to be called an apex battle in God's domain. If both sides fought for a sufficiently long time, She might gain enough insight to improve her combat standards further. Cold Shadow wasn't the only person with such thoughts. Purple Jade, Netherworld Empire's masked youth, and Solar Temple's long-haired youth were similarly curious to see how this fight would play out. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Since you two want me to send you back, I'll grant you your wish. After glancing at the two elderly men, Feng stopped concealing his aura and mana. Immediately, the space within the room froze, a stifling pressure enveloping everyone. Even Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe subconsciously stumbled 2 steps back, their eyes filled with fear and confusion as they gaped at Feng. Tier 5? The same question simultaneously ran through the minds of the two elderly men. However, before they could respond to the situation, Feng suddenly appeared before them, his movements so fast that it seemed as if he had split into 2. Feng then stabbed their hearts with his sword. Afterward, Feng returned to one entity, now standing quietly by the window wall behind the two elderly men. And before anyone realized what had happened, the sword in his hand was already back in its sheath, as if Feng had never drawn it. Meanwhile, Situ Qingtian's and Qiang Tianhe's HPs, which exceeded 10 million, had zeroed out by the time everyone realized what was going on. The two's bodies then collapsed to the ground, neither managing to react from start to finish. Chapter 2871 Tier 5? They're dead. The spectators in the room were stunned to see Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe collapsing to the floor, their minds failing to process this situation. Cold Shadow and the long-haired youth from Solar Temple, in particular, appeared petrified, their bodies remaining utterly motionless as they stared at the two sprawled corpses. How is this possible? The instructor failed to endure even a single hit? Compared to everyone else present, Cold Shadow and the long-haired youth had a much better understanding of Situ Qingtian's and Qiang Tianhe's strengths. Setting aside the fact that the two elderly men had combat standards close to the beyond domain realm, just their basic attributes and mana bodies were more than enough for them to combat superior mythic monsters of the same level. Despite being so monstrously powerful, Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe had failed to mount even the slightest bit of resistance to Feng before dying. This was simply unbelievable. Yuan Tiexin and Purple Jade were similarly astonished at this situation, their minds unable to recover from the shock even after a long time. They had expected a heaven-defying battle, and even felt that Feng had been unwise to provoke Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe. After all, if these two superior mythic equivalents went all out, destroying Zero Wing's residence wouldn't be impossible for them. Even if Feng eventually succeeded in killing them, Zero Wing would still have to pay a significant price. Yet now. However, unlike everyone else present, Nether King Relos's attention wasn't on Situ Qingtian's and Qiang Tianhe's corpses. Instead, he stared at Feng's figure standing calmly by the window wall, his eyes wide with fear and horror. A Tier 5 Sword Saint? Although it was only an instant, Relos had felt unprecedented fear overwhelming his body when Feng executed his attack. That spine-chilling fear hadn't come from just witnessing Feng's frightening power. Instead, it was an instinctive, bone-deep fear. Relos was no ordinary Tier 4 player. He was someone who had developed his mana body to an incredible extent. If he were facing a player of the same tier, his body wouldn't have such a reaction. The only way Relos could explain this situation was that Feng was no longer a Tier 4 player. Instead, Feng was already a Tier 5 Sword Saint. Although Relos had subconsciously muttered to himself, he had not done so on a private channel. Hence, no matter how soft his voice had been, the Tier 4 experts present heard him loud and clear. Tier 5. Everyone turned toward Feng one after another. Previously, they had been so shocked by Situ Qingtian's and Qiang Tianhe's deaths that they had forgotten about Feng's existence and the brief stagnation and fear they had felt. How is this possible? He's reached Tier 5 already. Cold Shadow and the long-haired youth wore grim expressions as they looked at Feng, their minds in denial. Feng no longer concealed his power. Hence, everyone in the room could feel tremendous pressure originating from a difference in life rating. Feng's life rating was something no Tier 4 player could possess, no matter what. If a Tier 4 player's life rating were equated to a bonfire, then Shifeng's life rating was like the scorching sun. Unless he deliberately suppressed and concealed his life rating, there was no way anybody could fail to notice it. Is this why he dares to ignore the two super guilds? When Yuan Tiexin looked at Situ Qingtian's and Qiyang Tianhe's corpses, and then at Shifeng's nonchalance, the shock in his heart multiplied exponentially. Meanwhile, Purple Jade was at a loss for words, a complicated expression on her face. She had come to Zero Wing City to determine her growth, and whether she could catch up to Shifeng, however, let alone catching up. The two of them weren't even standing on the same playing field anymore. Tier 5. In the current era, Tier 5 existences were already considered the apex existences of God's domain. They were capable of single-handedly destroying an entire kingdom. Monsters that no current Tier 4 player could hope to go up against. Guild Leader. Fire Dance's eyes brimmed with jubilation and shock when she looked at Shifeng. This revelation was too shocking. If Zero Wing still had to be fearful of the 5 great super guilds before, then it could now ignore their existence. After all, the gap between Tier 4 and Tier 5 was utterly massive. Even if the 5 great super guilds had many monstrously strong players, and even individuals at the Beyond Domain realm, none of them would be a match for a Tier 5 existence. Unless the 5 great super guilds similarly produced a Tier 5 expert, it wouldn't matter. Even if they attacked Zero Wing with a large number of Tier 4 experts. Not to mention, destroying a guild city was child's play for a Tier 5 player. Only a main city-level guild city could repulse a Tier 5. Moreover, if one didn't have any means of retaliation, even a main city would eventually fall to a Tier 5 player. While Fire Dance was inwardly celebrating Shifeng's achievement, Shifeng turned his sights to Cold Shadow and the long-haired youth from Solar Temple. He then said calmly, "I only dealt a small punishment to the two of them today. If your two guilds pull such a stunt one more time, I won't mind visiting your headquarters." Cold Shadow and the long-haired youth did not have any thoughts of refuting Shifeng. They promptly left the reception room, together with their guild members. Netherworld Empires and Secret Pavilions members quietly watched with complicated feelings as the two super guilds members left. Before, they had been treating Zero Wing as just another superpower. However, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call Zero Wing the #1 guild of God's domain now. Not only did Zero Wing possess a Tier 5 Sword Saint, but it even had a holy land like Zero Wing City. At this point, even the 5 great super guilds couldn't hope to compete with it. Given enough time, Zero Wing was sure to become God's domain's #1 guild. At this point, Relos suddenly stood up from his seat, approached Shifeng and said respectfully, "Guild Leader Black Flame, I, Relos, wish to establish a partnership with Zero Wing on behalf of Netherworld Empire. We do not want much. We only need 1 temporary guild residence in Zero Wing City. In return, Netherworld Empire will provide Zero Wing with resources and business connections in the Western continent. We will also establish a military alliance with Zero Wing to resist the Outer World players. May I know what you think of this proposal, Guild Leader Black Flame?" Although Relos's respectful demeanor and sincere offer might seem surprising to others, the masked youth from Netherworld Empire and Yuan Tiexin did not find this situation unexpected at all. While reaching Tier 5 might not be impossible for an expert like Relos, it would still be incredibly challenging. This was because the promotion to Tier 5 had nothing to do with a player's combat standards. Instead, it depended entirely on one's control over an understanding of mana, and the ability to construct a Tier 5 mana body. Before reaching Tier 5 himself, Relos would only be seeking death if he behaved arrogantly in front of a Tier 5 existence. Not one to fall behind, Yuan Tiexin also extended a similar partnership offer on behalf of the Secret Pavilion. The only difference was that the Secret Pavilion would only help defend Zero Wing City and Stone Forest City. It would not take part in any other battles. "Sure, I can agree to your conditions," Shifeng said after hearing the two guilds' offers. "However, I have an additional condition." Upon receiving this encouraging response, Relos grew a little excited and prompted, "Please speak, Guild Leader Black Flame." Initially, Relos thought that Shifeng wouldn't agree to his offer, and would choose to monopolize Zero Wing City's resources. Shifeng's willingness to negotiate was a positive outcome. Yuan Tiexin also nodded in agreement with Relos's words. Feng smiled and said, "My condition is simple: a complete guild legacy. If your 2 guilds can provide me with your complete guild legacies, I can give you temporary residences in Zero Wing City immediately." Zero Wing was not lacking in resources at the moment. So long as Zero Wing City remained standing, the guild would have no trouble acquiring resources. However, a guild's development did not rely solely on resources. It also needed manpower and talents. Hence, acquiring a complete guild legacy was of utmost importance for Zero Wing. Only with a complete guild legacy could Zero Wing reliably nurture its experts to the domain realm. "Okay, I agree to your condition on Netherworld Empire's behalf," Relos answered without hesitation. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Upon hearing Relos's response, Yuan Tiexing gritted his teeth and said, "The secret pavilion has no problem with this either." When Feng heard the 2 guilds' positive replies, he inwardly sighed in relief. After all, a guild legacy was the root of a guild. Many guilds would rather face annihilation than share their guild legacy. He then nodded and said, "Good. I wish our 3 guilds a happy partnership from now on." Shortly afterward, Feng signed a contract with the Secret Pavilion and Netherworld Empire, taking an essential step toward Zero Wing's becoming God's Domain's #1 guild. As Feng concluded his discussion with the 2 guilds, news of his promotion to Tier 5 and his killing Sita Tian and Qiang Tianhe in Zero Wing City quickly spread and reached the ears of God's Domain's various powers. For a time, the entire God's Domain was in an uproar. Chapter 2872, God's Domain shaken. Zero Wing City, Battle Arena. Guild leader Black Flame has been promoted to Tier 5. 16th Cloud was stunned when she read the report she received. Looking at Sorrowful Silence, she asked, "Have you verified this?" Although quite a number of God's Domain's Void Realm experts had gotten promoted to Tier 4 already, with Domain Realm experts even making considerable progress in developing their mana bodies, everyone was still a long way from reaching Tier 5. Creating a Tier 5 mana body was an entirely different matter from improving the completion rate of one's mana body. Since most Tier 4 experts hadn't even developed their mana bodies to a significant extent, getting promoted to Tier 5 shouldn't be possible. Hence, 16th Cloud found it truly hard to believe that Feng had already reached Tier 5. However, instead of getting the answer she hoped for, Sorrowful Silence nodded solemnly. He then said in a shocked voice, "Yes, I happened to be in another reception room at the time, negotiating with Zero Wing's representative for a long-term lease of the Battle Arena's combat rooms. My room was quite close to the reception room used to host the Secret Pavilion and the 3 super guilds. Every Zero Wing member on the floor reacted strongly. I also saw Mythologies and Solar Temples members leave the residence, looking grim." In reality, Sorrowful Silence didn't just hear about Feng's promotion to Tier 5 from Zero Wing's members. He had also personally experienced the frightening aura Feng had exuded. Despite being in an entirely different room, he had still sensed that aura clearly, and it had been much stronger than the auras of the Tier 5 NPCs he had come across before. Of course, the Tier 5 NPCs Sorrowful Silence met previously had never displayed any killing intent. They had even been actively suppressing their auras. In comparison, Feng had not held anything back when he attacked Sita Tian and Qiang Tianhe. This was why Sorrowful Silence was confident Feng had reached Tier 5. This is interesting. 16th Cloud revealed a hint of joy and excitement after hearing Sorrowful Silence's confirmation. Now that Zero Wing has a Tier 5 combatant and opened Zero Wing City to the public, the Eastern Continent's status quo will get reshuffled. That's right. Thank goodness we're already strategic allies with Zero Wing, Sorrowful Silence said, nodding in agreement with 16th Cloud. Tier 5 existences were different from Tier 4 existences. Tier 4 players couldn't capture a guild city all by themselves. That was a task that required a large number of Tier 4 players. When Tier 4 players were still scarce, Zero Wing might have been able to pose a significant threat to the various superpowers, but it didn't threaten their roots. However, the situation had changed. A Tier 5 player could effortlessly capture a guild city, even a superpower's headquarters, which meant that Zero Wing had the power to uproot and destroy superpowers. Moreover, now that Zero Wing's expert count had skyrocketed, it was entirely capable of expanding its territory and occupying more guild cities. It wouldn't face a manpower shortage even if it captured 5 or 6 more guild cities. When the Eastern continent's various powers received this piece of news, the superpowers that had always been working against Zero Wing fell into an awkward situation. This was especially true for Starlink. Upon learning about Feng's promotion to Tier 5, Starlink's executives all had ashen complexions. Inside the guild leader's office of Starlink's residence in the Dark Knight Empire, Commander, now that Black Flame has gotten promoted to Tier 5, he definitely won't spare Starlink. Should we migrate our experts to the Western continent now? A level 150, Tier 4 female ranger suggested as she looked at the handsome youth quietly reading documents in the office. How many times have I told you to refer to me as guild leader? I am no longer just the commander of Tremorous Clown, but Starlink's guild leader as well, Lu Tiandi said as he glanced at the enchanting female ranger. Yes, guild leader, the ranger responded calmly as she looked at Lu Tiandi. She then repeated, should we migrate now? That won't be necessary. Looking at the report in his hands, Lu Tiandi explained nonchalantly, Black Flame's promotion to Tier 5 is indeed a big problem for us, but there's no need for us to be afraid of him yet. The Eastern continent situation is no longer the same as before. The Outer World's forces are Zero Wing's biggest problem. Black Flame's promotion to Tier 5 should pose a considerable headache for those Outer World players. Moreover, Zero Wing has severed all chances of friendly relations with Mythology and Solar Temple. In the next war, the Eastern continent's native NPC forces will definitely not provide Starmoon Kingdom and the Twin Towers Kingdom with any support. At that time, Zero Wing might not even be able to defend its own guild cities, let alone target other forces. If I were Black Flame, I wouldn't have exposed myself as a Tier 5 so soon and become a target for the Outer World forces. Instead, I would focus on raiding dungeons and world bosses to raise my guild's strength. God's Domain isn't a single-player game. A single Tier 5 player cannot stop all of the Outer World's NPC forces. The enchanting ranger's eyes brightened at Lu Tiandi's words. Doesn't this mean we have a chance? We can forget about Silverwing City since the Outer World forces will capture it. On the other hand, we can get our hands on Stone Forest City, since it is close to the Dark Knight Empire. Even if Black Flame is Tier 5, he can defend only one location at a time. Once the war resumes, he'll be preoccupied with Zero Wing City. At that time, we can find an opportunity to secure Stone Forest City, Lu Tiandi said, smiling. However, this isn't something we can accomplish alone. Go and contact the superpowers that have a grudge against Zero Wing now. I believe they will be more than willing to come on board this plan. Yes, sir. The ranger nodded. While God's Domain's various powers were reeling from the news of Feng's promotion to Tier 5 and preparing countermeasures, Feng had finalized his discussion with the Secret Pavilion and Netherworld Empire over the specifics of their partnership. Guild leader, now that we have the 2 guild legacies, we can probably nurture a batch of Void Realm experts and possibly Domain Realm experts within a short period, Fire Dance said. When she thought about how the Secret Pavilion and Netherworld Empire would be sending all their information on the realms of refinement to Zero Wing's headquarters tomorrow, she couldn't help feeling excited. Although the guild legacy Zero Wing received from Unyielding Soul previously was indeed valuable, the information provided allowed Zero Wing to nurture experts only to the Flowing Water Realm at a reliable rate. It was still a far cry from a complete guild legacy. After all, only Void Realm experts could serve as a superpower's mainstay. Zero Wing had far too few of such peak experts. The only reason Zero Wing managed to produce as many Tier 4 experts as it had now was the various God's Domain legacies, an excellent training environment the guild possessed. Even then, these Tier 4 experts could only rank among the lower rungs of Tier 4 players. That's right. Feng nodded. He similarly felt happy over this matter. Only when Zero Wing possessed a complete guild legacy of its own could it become a true titan in God's Domain. Once the guild had the Secret Pavilions and Netherworld Empire's guild legacies, it would no longer have to worry about lacking peak experts. Zero Wing could also recruit more talented players since these talents would no longer have to worry about Zero Wing lacking a guild legacy. Guild leader, What should we do next? Fire Dance asked. Now that we've become enemies with Mythology and Solar Temple, the Outer World forces will target Starmoon Kingdom and the Twin Towers Kingdom once the war resumes. Should we start withdrawing our forces from those two kingdoms? Mythology and Solar Temple held significant influence in the Eastern continent. It was also certain that the Outer World forces would target Zero Wing. However, with Zero Wing's current strength, defending Starmoon Kingdom and the Twin Towers Kingdom wouldn't be feasible. To reduce Zero Wing's losses, the guild ought to begin pulling its forces out of these two kingdoms as soon as possible. Next, chuckling, Feng said, go and gather all of the guild's tier 4s now. Gather all of the guild's tier 48? Feng's command confused Fire Dance. With the imminent war, what they should do was relocate the mobile fortress and Silverwing City. Otherwise, once the Outer World's NPC army arrived, Zero Wing would lose both strongholds. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yes. Smiling, Feng said. Since I've reached tier 5 already, it's about time we took care of the trouble over at the Orc Empire. We'll also use this opportunity to let the various superpowers know the consequences of offending us. The current God's domain had far too little knowledge of tier 5 existences. Even if Feng had killed Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe, the various superpowers only knew that he was much stronger than tier 4 players. They still didn't understand what tier 5 represented. I'll have them gather right away. Fire Dance burned with eagerness when she heard Feng's words. Ever since she had gotten promoted to tier 4, she had never had a good fight or launched an all-out war against other superpowers. She also wasn't the only person to hold such sentiments. The other tier 4 experts in the guild harbored similar thoughts. Now they finally had the opportunity to display their strength. Chapter 2873, Present Zero Wing Orc Empire, Silverwing City. Droves of people came and went on the city's main street. More than half of these people were NPCs from the neighboring kingdoms and empires. Due to the world passages opening and the invasion of the Outer World's player and NPC forces, both native players and NPCs had their range of activity restricted significantly. As the strongest city in the Orc Empire, one capable of fending off attacks from anything below tier 5, Silverwing City had already become a mecca for the neighboring kingdoms and empires' players and NPCs. Moreover, the news of Black Flame reaching tier 5 sent the number of players visiting Silverwing City skyrocketing, resulting in overcrowding. All of these new arrivals sought to join Zero Wing and develop long-term in Silverwing City. At this time, tier 4 experts radiating frightening auras appeared in Zero Wing's residence, one after another. The arrival of these experts instantly silenced the bustling residents. Even the players lining up to take the test to join the guild couldn't help feeling frightened. What's going on with Zero Wing? Why have so many tier 4 experts gathered? Are they here to maintain order since there are so many people applying to join the guild? Amazing! So this is Zero Wing? I saw over 50 tier 4 experts already. Some super guilds don't have this many tier 4 experts. That's not all of it. Look at their equipment. Every one of them has at least 3 pieces of level 150 epic equipment. I wonder when I'll be able to get one for myself. The eyes of the players lined up in the residence's courtyard widened in shock as they took in Zero Wing's tier 4 experts. Previously, they had recognized that Zero Wing was a powerful guild, but felt that it had become a superpower in God's domain only because of Zero Wing City and Black Flame's undefeated legend. Upon seeing the situation now, they realized that Zero Wing's foundation was far more terrifying than they thought. Not only did Zero Wing possess far more tier 4 experts than most superpowers, but these experts also had superior equipment standards compared to the various superpowers tier 4 experts. Currently, over 50 tier 4 experts were gathered in the courtyard. This was a spectacular scene that those present would rarely get to see in their lifetimes. Not to mention, these tier 4 experts were not repressing their auras at all. When these auras overlapped, they came together to generate an aura far more frightening than that of superior mythic monsters. Even tier 3 experts shuddered involuntarily, forced to keep their distance from these tier 4 experts. Why would Zero Wing gather so many tier 4 experts here? Is it conducting a major operation or something? This is indeed unusual. A guild would gather so many of its Tier 4 experts in one place only for a special event. As the number of Tier 4 experts kept increasing, the non-members in the courtyard felt something amiss. Even Zero Wings members started growing antsy at this situation. Ji Luorong looked at Violet Cloud, who had just arrived in the courtyard, and asked, "Big Sis Violet, do you know why the guild leader suddenly summoned us?" "I don't know either. Big Sis Fire suddenly contacted me and told me to come here right away," Violet Cloud replied, shaking her head. She then visually inspected Ji Luorong and exclaimed in surprise, "Luorong, your mana body is at the 110% completion rate already. You've made so much progress." Ji Luorong had joined Zero Wing only recently. Although Zero Wing was much stronger than before, the fact that Ji Luorong managed to increase her mana body's completion rate from under 105% to her current 110% proved that she was monstrously talented. "It's because of the Sword Saint legacy Big Sis Fire gave me. If not for it, I would have taken much longer to reach 110%, Ji Luorong said, smiling. Inwardly, she still felt a little delighted. After all, only a tiny number of experts in God's domain had managed to develop their mana bodies to a 110% completion rate at this stage of the game. However, when Ji Luorong carefully sensed the mana surrounding Violet Cloud's body, her delight instantly vanished. The mana close to Violet Cloud had already liquefied. Although it was limited to a small portion of her mana, it was still better than nothing. The fact that Violet Cloud could accomplish this feat meant that her mana body's completion rate had already reached 115% or above, according to what Feng told them. She might have even reached the 120% completion rate already. At this time, a masked, middle-aged man clad in black approached Ji Luorong. The aura this man radiated practically rivaled that of a superior mythic monster. This middle-aged man was none other than Crimson Mask, another Eternal Glory member who had joined Zero Wing. "Commander, why did Big Sis Fire suddenly call for us? Is something big going on?" Crimson Mask asked curiously as he looked at Ji Luorong. "I don't know. Big Sis Fire only told me to come here as soon as possible and nothing else." Ji Luorong shook her head. When she noticed the qualitative transformation of Crimson Mask's demeanor, she couldn't help sighing to herself ruefully. B**B be greater than Y/B. Initially, Crimson Mask had opposed Eternal Glories joining Zero Wing. He felt that even without joining a guild, he could still develop Eternal Glory to great heights. However, after a few bouts with Fire Dance and receiving a sound thrashing each time, Crimson Mask had changed completely. Now he was even referring to Fire Dance as Big Sis. However, Crimson Mask was much more fortunate than someone else, his fate considerably better. Besides Crimson Mask, a lunatic named Invincible Swallow had come to Zero Wing to challenge Violet Cloud, and the fate this lunatic suffered was simply terrible. That fight could be described as an adult beating up a toddler. Afterward, when Invincible Swallow returned for a rematch at a later date, Violet Cloud just so happened to be out on an errand. Aqua Rose had been present at the time, so he challenged her instead. After that match, Invincible Swallow began questioning his life. Even now he was still training crazily in Stone Forest City's battle arena every day. While Zero Wing's Tier 4 members wondered why Fire Dance had suddenly gathered them, a man and a woman approached the courtyard from a distance. These two people were none other than Feng and Fire Dance. Feng was just walking casually, yet his steps distorted the space around him. It was as if the surrounding space couldn't contain his presence and could crumble at any time. In addition, as Feng did not bother concealing his aura, everyone present gasped involuntarily when they sensed it. Although Feng wasn't directing any hostility at anyone, merely letting his aura radiate freely, the Tier 4 players present felt their bodies becoming incredibly heavy, as if someone had tied metal weights to their bodies. As for the Tier 3 players present, they instinctively retreated from Feng, not daring to move even an inch closer to him. "He's the guild leader?" Crimson Mask was shocked as he looked at Feng. Before today, Crimson Mask had only ever heard the name of Black Flame. From the gossip circulating inside Zero Wing, he knew that Feng was Zero Wing's #1 expert, and that his existence was the linchpin of the entire guild. Crimson Mask had thought that Feng was only slightly stronger than Fire Dance. However, given this situation, Feng wasn't just somewhat stronger than Fire Dance. He was practically standing on a whole other level. Aside from Crimson Mask, many of the Tier 4 experts who had joined Zero Wing recently were also stunned by Feng's terrifying aura. After glancing at the crowd gathered, Fire Dance reported to Feng, "Guild leader, apart from the 2 vice guild leaders and around a dozen others, who are currently occupied with important matters, all of the guild's Tier 4 members are here." Not bad. Feng nodded in approval as he scanned the crowd before him. A total of 59 Tier 4 players waited in the courtyard, their levels ranging from level 148 to level 156. More than half of these players had broken through the 100% threshold of their mana bodies already, with nearly 20 having reached the 105% threshold and 7 at the 110% threshold. The 7 to reach 110% completion rate or above were Violet Cloud, Fire Dance, Ji Luorong, Alluring Summer, Yin Tianxing, Iluafei, and Silent Blade. One could consider this lineup a spectacular force at this stage of the game. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU at this time Kola, who had already reached level 150, could no longer hold back his excitement, asking, "Guild leader, are we going to raid the Orc capital city?" The Orc capital city's core area was a special secret land. The degree of danger in this secret land closely rivaled that of a God Mode regional dungeon. The loot inside was likewise incredible. However, one required a sufficiently large team of Tier 4 players to raid it. This was why nobody had succeeded in raiding it even now. Meanwhile, Zero Wing currently had 59 Tier 4 players and 1 Tier 5 player gathered. They were already more than qualified to raid the Orc capital city's secret land. When everyone heard Kola's words, they immediately grew restless. After all, this was a level 150+ secret land they were talking about. They would definitely gain significant harvests if they raided it. "No, I didn't gather you here for the Orc capital city, but for something else instead," Feng said, shaking his head. "Something else?" Kola and the others grew confused. "That's right." Smiling, Feng explained. "To ensure our survival in the upcoming war and Zero Wing's future development, I plan on annihilating Ancient Rock City and eliminating Beast Emperor from the Orc Empire." Chapter 2874, Descending upon Ancient Rock City Orc Empire, Ancient Rock City. The walls of Ancient Rock City were over 50 meters tall. Despite numerous faux saint monsters roaming the barren land outside the city walls, the Tier 3 players patrolling atop the walls completely disregarded these monsters as if they did not exist. Surprisingly, the faux saint monsters that most of the Eastern Continent's players regarded as a nightmare showed no intentions of attacking Ancient Rock City. They behaved like scarecrows under the city walls. At this time, a merchant caravan, composed of over 100 players and over a dozen horse-drawn carriages, slowly approached Ancient Rock City from a distance. Despite catching sight of these players, the countless faux saint monsters roaming the barren land outside Ancient Rock City behaved as if they did not see this caravan. Looking at the level 120 faux saint monsters around him, a level 136, Tier 3 swordsman escorting the caravan exclaimed, "The Sacred Heart Amulet Saint's hand sold us is amazing. Those mythic faux saint monsters ignore us even when we're only 30 yards away from them." Even NPCs were helpless against the faux saint monsters running rampant in the many neighboring kingdoms and the Black Dragon Empire. The danger made it increasingly difficult for merchant caravans to make money. However, so long as a caravan carried a Sacred Heart amulet, it could avoid the faux saint monsters' attacks altogether. At the swordsman's words, the level 137, Tier 3 Guardian Knight sitting at the head of the caravan looked at the Sacred Heart amulet in his hand. With a hint of ambition in his eyes, he said, "I know, right? We must buy some more of these Sacred Heart amulets in Ancient Rock City. We can make a fortune reselling them in the neighboring kingdoms and empires." The Sacred Heart amulet was a non-bag space item. Although players could wear it on their person, they couldn't store it in their bags. It also couldn't be transported by teleportation. However, Saint's Hand sold the Sacred Heart amulet only in Ancient Rock City. None of Saint's Hand's other residences sold it. Many merchant players and adventurer teams had realized that they could make a fortune by purchasing the Sacred Heart amulets in bulk from ancient Rock City and reselling them in the neighboring kingdoms and empires. Nowadays, many faux saint monsters roamed the territories of the neighboring kingdoms and the Black Dragon Empire. Leaving the safety of towns and cities would expose players to not only the standard monsters, but also a large number of faux saint monsters. The Sacred Heart amulet could mitigate the danger. More importantly, the Sacred Heart amulet was a consumable, so it was always in high demand in the neighboring kingdoms and the Black Dragon Empire. Selling these amulets in these countries wouldn't be a problem. The main reason their Fighting Tiger adventurer team had invested a considerable fortune into hiring more than a dozen advanced carriages was to make an even bigger fortune off these amulets. At this time, a level 136, Tier 3 female ranger standing atop the leading carriage pointed at a distant silhouette and shouted, "Commander, we're almost at Ancient Rock City." "Okay. Everyone get yourselves ready, newbies especially. Ancient Rock City is different from other guild cities." The leading Guardian Knight shouted through the team chat. Although the city prohibits fighting, it is still a bona fide dark city. There are tons of dark players there, so make sure not to get marked by them. Otherwise, we'll be in a ton of trouble once we leave the city. At the Guardian Knight's words, the team's veterans promptly took out a magic scroll for the Tier 1 Mana Guard spell and used it on themselves. With the Mana Guard active, the common tracking mark would be ineffective against them. Upon seeing this, the newbies to Ancient Rock City also took out the magic scrolls they prepared and used the scrolls on themselves. As the caravan trundled increasingly closer to Ancient Rock City, the newbies couldn't help gasping in shock at their first sight of the towering stronghold. Ancient Rock City was undoubtedly the most spectacular guild city they had ever seen in their careers in God's domain. Not only did the city have walls over 50 meters tall guarding it, but it covered an area rivaling NPC main cities. Most importantly, two 30-meter-tall faux saint monsters flanked the city's entrance. The two monsters wore steel plate armor, and each carried two gigantic swords. If one inspected these two monsters with an identification skill, one would find that they were level 160 superior mythic-ranked faux saint slayers. The aura of these two faux saint slayers sent involuntary shudders through all the players entering Ancient Rock City. Just by standing there, the two superior mythics made everyone feel as if their souls would get devoured. Besides the two faux saint slayers standing guard, more than 30 evil dark dragons wheeled in the sky above Ancient Rock City. These 50-meter-long evil dark dragons radiated auras close to rivaling the superior mythic-ranked faux saint slayers. When the Fighting Tiger adventurer team arrived before the city gate, the members spotted a long line of players and NPCs waiting to enter the city. Many of these NPCs exuded dense bloodlust, which proved that they roamed the dark side of God's domain. At this time, however, even Tier 4 NPCs were obediently waiting in line. Amazing! There are so many Tier 4 monsters and NPCs here. Even a kingdom's capital city isn't comparable to this place. The first-time visitors among Fighting Tiger exclaimed. Of course! Ancient Rock City is Saint's Hand's main headquarters. Moreover, the city has already become a mecca for the dark forces operating in the neighboring kingdoms and the Black Dragon Empire. If we include the city's defensive structures, even the outerworld forces will have difficulty taking down Ancient Rock City. Now many well-known and top adventurer teams are developing here, the leading Guardian Knight explained. From what I heard, the superpower Miracle has also dispatched many experts to garrison Ancient Rock City. Ancient Rock City is the safest city in the Orc Empire. Nobody will dare target it. The Saint's Hand member conducting inspections nearby overheard the Guardian Knight's words and couldn't help putting on a prideful expression. Currently, Ancient Rock City was only one step away from becoming a main city. Its combat power far exceeded that of guild cities of the various superpowers. Had Saint's Hand not been wary of the outerworld's NPC forces, it would have long since flattened the neighboring kingdoms and the Black Dragon Empire, becoming an existence surpassing the 5 great super guilds. However, as the Fighting Tiger adventurer team was undergoing inspection, a gigantic figure suddenly approached Ancient Rock City from the distant sky. Its speed was as fast as a mighty gale, And it stopped only after arriving in front of the city. The steel behemoth over 100 meters long hung in the sky roughly 400 yards from ancient Rock City, overlooking the entire city. Several dozen players stood on this steel behemoth. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. At this steel behemoth's appearance, the entire ancient Rock City went into an uproar. It's the Crimson Dragon flying ship. That's Zero Wing's flying ship. Quick look. Isn't that black flame? Nowadays, almost everybody in God's domain was familiar with the Crimson Dragon flying ship. After all, this thing had long since become Zero Wing's signature. Zero Wing was even using some of these flying ships to transport cargo across the sea, to the envy of many superpowers. However, Zero Wing's sudden visit to ancient Rock City confused many of the city's players. Meanwhile, upon spotting the Crimson Dragon flying ship, the evil dark dragons patrolling the city's airspace let loose deafening roars. The two foe saint slayers standing guard by the city's entrance also raised their heads and gripped their weapons, going on full alert against the flying ship. As everyone in ancient Rock City fell into panic and confusion, Feng looked down at the city below from aboard the Crimson Dragon flying ship and shouted, "5 minutes! I will give you 5 minutes to withdraw from the city if you do not wish to get dragged into Saint's hands. Problem. Anyone who doesn't withdraw after 5 minutes will disappear from God's domain together with ancient Rock City." Chapter 2875, Ancient Rock City in Peril. Is Zero Wing planning to attack the city? This is crazy. Zero Wing must have lost its mind. How dare they attack ancient Rock City? Inevitably, ancient Rock City's inhabitants doubted Feng's declaration, with many of them considering it a joke. Saint's hand had continuously strengthened ancient Rock City. Currently, the city's defenses were superior to those of other guild cities, and the combatants stationed within the city were more than enough to instill fear in the various superpowers. Not to mention, the dark forces of over a dozen countries gathered in the city. Apart from dark guilds, there were also plenty of NPC forces among these dark forces. These forces had paid a considerable price to settle in ancient Rock City, and even treated the city as their base of operations. Anyone who dared to attack ancient Rock City would make an enemy of these dark forces. Be it dark guilds or dark NPC forces, every one of them had at least 2 or 3 Tier 4 combatants under their command. Moreover, Miracle had recently garrisoned the city, so there should be close to 200 Tier 4 combatants defending ancient Rock City right now. One could conquer an entire kingdom with that many Tier 4 combatants. Most importantly, ancient Rock City was currently an advanced guild city, only one step away from becoming a main guild city. Ancient Rock City's resident players weren't the only ones shocked by this situation. Beast Emperor, who was conducting research in the City Lord's mansion, inadvertently crushed the research instrument he held when he received news of Zero Wing's sudden arrival. Black Flame, how bold of you! It seems you've gotten arrogant while I was lying low. Beast Emperor growled with a cold glint in his eyes. Lord Beast Emperor, Black Flame is rumored to have reached Tier 5 already. Should we notify the Sacred Envoy? The level 152, Tier 4 Berserker, who had made the report, asked. News of Feng's promotion to Tier 5 had long since reached the ears of God's domain's various powers. Meanwhile, a Tier 5 player was in existence. Even Saint's hand had to be wary putting away the tools on his table. Beast Emperor glanced at Saint's hand's guild leader, Furious Fist, and smiled lightly. No need. Call for some people and come along with me. I want to see what exactly gives Black Flame the confidence to act arrogantly in my ancient Rock City. After saying so, Beast Emperor turned around and left. A robust man with black skin covered in flashing runes, who stood guard before the research room, silently trailed him. Yes, sir. Furious Fist hurriedly followed after the robust man. Less than 3 minutes after Feng's declaration, many players and adventurer teams, afraid of trouble, had already withdrawn from ancient Rock City. Only dark players and a few courageous normal players chose to remain. At the same time, players from the various dark adventurer teams and dark guilds also gathered at ancient Rock City's entrance, one after another, and watched the fleeing players. These cowards! Zero Wing sent only a few dozen players, yet these people are already running away. Zero Wing is famous, after all. It's normal for them to run away. Not to mention, Black Flame is also here. It'd be strange for them not to escape. These people are simply idiots. Zero Wing won its past battles only because of the powerful defenses of its cities. That's right. So what if Zero Wing managed to produce a Tier 5 player? We'll teach these guys what it means to offend us dark forces. The dark players revealed expressions of rage and excitement as they looked up at the Crimson Dragon flying ship. Zero Wing's reputation was through the roof right now. Moreover, Feng had gotten promoted to Tier 5. Hence, players were starting to consider Zero Wing God's domain's #1 guild. If a battle were to occur in the outside world, dark players like themselves would indeed be afraid of Feng. However, it was a different story if the battle took place inside Ancient Rock City. With the city's magic array, they could still take him on with the mini Tier 4 players they had. Not to mention, a large number of Faux Saint monsters protected Ancient Rock City, including 2 superior mythic-ranked Faux Saint slayers. Even if they couldn't kill Feng, they could, at least, make the other members of Zero Wing suffer. As the 5-minute limit approached, the number of players retreating from Ancient Rock City also increased. At this time, the players that had withdrawn from Ancient Rock City suddenly felt a chill envelop their bodies. Even Tier 3 experts found themselves partially kneeling on the ground. The next moment, a group of 40 players flew out from the City Lord's mansion. Apart from Furious Fist and Saint's Hand's Tier 4 executives, 17 players on the team were people that none of Ancient Rock City's inhabitants had ever seen before. These 17 players looked nothing like humans. Not only were their bodies pitch black, but there were also flashing runes engraved all over their bodies. These players' auras were also stronger than even that of superior mythic monsters. When combined, their auras transformed into a tsunami that swept through the entire city and its surroundings. Amazing! Is this Saint's Hand's rumored Bloodstained Knight Legion? That's not all. Even Beast Emperor left the City Lord's mansion. It seems we'll have a good show this time. Indeed. I heard that Beast Emperor has constantly been plotting revenge on Zero Wing after getting slaughtered at the Secret Covenant Tower. Now that Zero Wing has come knocking on his door, there's no way Beast Emperor will spare Zero Wing. The various major powers experts standing atop the city walls were surprised when they saw Beast Emperor and the Bloodstained Knights making an appearance. At the same time, they were shocked by the power Saint's Hand displayed. The superpowers on the Eastern continent had always been fearful of Saint's Hand, and this situation greatly confused the various major powers. However, after seeing Saint's Hand's top combatants, they realized that the superpowers' fear of Saint's Hand wasn't without basis. Setting aside the fact that Saint's Hand had over 20 Tier 4 experts at the Void Realm or above, just the 17 rumored Bloodstained Knights were more than enough to instill fear into any player force. After all, even a Tier 4 player would tremble in fear if they had to go up against a Bloodstained Knight, let alone 17 Bloodstained Knights simultaneously. That would be a nightmare. Shortly afterward, Beast Emperor's group arrived above the city gate. Seeing this, the various powers' leadership promptly stepped forward to greet Beast Emperor. 1,000 Miles, one of Miracle's Vice Guild leaders, was even among them. 1,000 Miles' actions astonished the various major powers present. They never thought that even a superpower like Miracle would defer to Beast Emperor. After Beast Emperor responded to a few greetings, he flew into the air with his subordinates and glared at Feng on the Crimson Dragon flying ship. He then said coldly, "Black Flame, you and I could have stayed out of each other's way in the Orc Empire. Yet you chose to come to attack me. So long as you apologize right now, I can ignore this transgression for the time being. Otherwise, none of you will be returning alive today." After Beast Emperor finished speaking, a frightening amount of evil energy erupted from the 17 Bloodstained Knights behind him, distorting the surrounding space and muddying it. The terrifying power within the evil energy made even those who had fled more than 1,000 yards from the city tremble. Moreover, the 2 Faux Saint Slayers had flown to flank the Crimson Dragon flying ship, while the 30-plus evil dark dragons had surrounded it, thoroughly sealing off all of Zero Wing's escape routes. The fleeing players gasped at this scene. With such a force under Saint's Hand's command, the guild could take on even an empire. Damn it. I thought Saint's hand was going to suffer this time, but it seems I miscalculated. Zero Wing has always relied on Black Flame to survive. Now it seems Zero Wing has finally met its match. If this situation isn't handled properly, apart from Black Flame, the other Zero Wing members present probably won't leave alive. At this time, even a fool could tell how powerful Saint's hand's forces were. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that even an NPC force with a Tier 5 combatant under its command wouldn't dare to offend Saint's hand casually, let alone Zero Wing. Apologize. Feng laughed. Beast Emperor, it seems you're growing senile. Have you forgotten how you died at my hands last time? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You bastard. Feng's words enraged Beast Emperor. However, before Beast Emperor could say anything more, mana exploded from Feng's body. Immediately, an indescribably heavy pressure descended on the entire ancient rock city. World creation. The next moment, Beast Emperor and the others plummeted to the ground one after another. Even the Tier 4 experts standing on the city walls found themselves on one knee under the strong pressure. Chapter 2876, Shock. Impossible. Every player inside Ancient Rock City nearly had their eyes fall out of their sockets when they saw Beast Emperor and the other Tier 45 plummeting to the ground. Even the Zero Wing members present were stunned. This scene thoroughly exceeded their imagination. In the current God's domain, Tier 4 players were already considered peak combatants and displayed a guild's foundation. Yet, under Feng's mana domain, Beast Emperor and the other Tier 4 combatants on his side could exhibit only 20% or so of their usual combat power. They even lost their ability to fly and manipulate ambient mana. In the blink of an eye, these existences that originally stood at the peak of God's domain had become no different from Tier 3 players. At this time, let alone a Tier 5 player like Feng, even Tier 4 experts could slaughter Ancient Rock City's defenders. This is the strength of Tier 5s? When the players who had evacuated Ancient Rock City looked at Feng hovering proudly above the city, an indescribable sense of shock and horror filled their hearts. As veteran players of God's domain, they knew that a significant difference existed between tiers. They also knew that a Tier 5 player undoubtedly stood at the apex of all players in the current God's domain. However, only after witnessing the power of a Tier 5 player did they understand how large the gap between Tier 4 and Tier 5 was. In front of a Tier 5 existence, Tier 4 players would only be making fools of themselves if they tried to win by Zerg tactics. The Tier 4 monsters among Ancient Rock City's defenders, though, weren't as badly off as the Tier 4 players. Because monsters mainly relied on their basic attributes and rarely manipulated the ambient mana to do combat, their penalty was not as large as the Tier 4 players. Regardless, the mythic-ranked evil Dark Dragons still had their combat power reduced by half, whereas the superior mythic-ranked Faux Saint Slayers had theirs reduced by 30%. Moreover, all of them lost their ability to fly. Against Tier 4 players capable of flight, they would be at a significant disadvantage. Unlike everyone else, Feng wasn't surprised at the scene before him. Everyone failed to understand that his mana domain was different from the average mana domain. Existences at the world creation standard could create a small world within their mana domains. The power of such a mana domain was on an entirely different level compared to the average mana domain. Even a Tier 5 existence would be at a disadvantage if they got caught within a Tier 5 world creation expert's mana domain without any countermeasures, let alone Tier 4 players and monsters. Meanwhile, after experiencing this unexpected turn of events, a hint of fear had surfaced in Beast Emperor's eyes. Despite this situation, he still sneered, "Black Flame, don't get too delighted just yet. Don't forget that this is Ancient Rock City." As soon as Beast Emperor finished speaking, an enormous, threefold magic array manifested from the City Lord's mansion. After the magic array gathered mana from the surroundings for a brief moment, it released pulses of mana that enveloped the city. Immediately, the city defenders felt the heavy pressure on their bodies disappear. Now, although Feng's mana domain still subjected everyone to a certain degree of suppression, their combat power had recovered to 80% of their usual. More importantly, they had also regained their ability to fly. Feng was slightly surprised when he looked at the barrier enveloping ancient rock city. What a powerful barrier. It seems you've invested quite a lot into this city. His mana domain could render even master magic barriers useless. One would need to use at least a grandmaster magic barrier to contend with his mana domain. Meanwhile, grandmaster magic arrays were incredibly rare in God's domain, let alone a grandmaster magic array that could cover an entire city. The value of every set of scrolls for such a magic array could rival that of fragmented legendary items. Black Flame, do you think you're the only one with the means to defend cities? Looking at Feng, Beast Emperor sneered. This is an ancient grandmaster magic array. Although ancient rock city hasn't reached the main city level yet, it is no weaker than a main city in terms of defense. Although you're tier 5, don't even think about taking down ancient rock city. A main city's defensive magic array was wholly capable of withstanding tier 5 attacks. So long as the magic array had a constant energy supply, even tier 5 existences shouldn't think of penetrating it. Meanwhile, exhausting the energy supply of a main city's defensive magic array wasn't something just one tier 5 existence could accomplish. One would need several tier 5 individuals or siege weapons with tier 5 destructive power to do so. However, Zero Wing only had one tier 5 combatant now. In other words, breaking through ancient rock city's defensive barrier would be nothing but a pipe dream. When Beast Emperor finished speaking, the members of the various powers in ancient rock city sighed in relief. They then looked at Feng with sneers on their faces. Black Flame, so what if you're tier 5? That's right. What can you do by yourself? When Feng had extended his mana domain before, everyone within ancient rock city had felt strong pressure overwhelming them. Saint's Hand's tier 4 experts were no exception. However, now that ancient rock city had deployed its defensive magic array, even a tier 5 player like Feng would be helpless against them. Next, all they needed to do was fight a war of attrition, something they did not fear in the slightest. After all, ancient rock city had accumulated a massive stockpile of magic crystals from the sales of Sacred Heart amulets. Not to mention, the Outer World's NPC forces would soon begin the second war against the Eastern Continent's native forces. And in this upcoming war, the Outer World forces would set Zero Wing as their primary target. Zero Wing couldn't afford a war of attrition with ancient rock city at all. The longer it fought, the worse off it would be in the upcoming war. Guild leader, let's attack the barrier together. I want to see how long it can last against our combined attacks. Fire Dance said, gnashing her teeth as she looked at ancient rock city's arrogant residents. That's right. If it spells with tier 5 power, I can use a few as well. I refuse to believe we can't break this barrier. Zhao Yueru said, nodding in agreement with Fire Dance. For other tier 4 players, exhibiting tier 5 power would indeed be a challenging task. However, her Frostflame's Wrath was a top-tier fragmented legendary weapon. With it, the fire and ice-type tier 4 spells she cast could exhibit tier 5 power. No, that won't be necessary, Feng said, shaking his head. Zhao Yueru was a bona fide mobile turret. If he hadn't gotten promoted to tier 5, she would rank at the very top of Zero Wing in terms of firepower. However, besieging a city was different from attacking monsters. The defenders inside the city could launch attacks to counter Zhao Yueru's spells. The defenders could even target her directly, preventing her from casting her spells altogether. This would drastically reduce Zhao Yueru's ability to damage the defensive magic array. Having only the occasional tier 5 attack land on the defensive magic array would yield hardly any effect. But we can't just sit still and do nothing, right? Zhao Yueru said in annoyance. Although she knew that she couldn't contribute much, it was still better than nothing. Moreover, if they allowed Saint's Hand to continue behaving so arrogantly, it would deal a massive blow to Zero Wing's morale. After all, Zero Wing had already declared to the public that it would capture ancient rock city. Currently, everyone was watching this fight. The various powers absent from this battlefield were no exception. They were all observing every detail of the battlefield, intensely awaiting the outcome of this siege. If Zero Wing won, then the various superpowers would no longer dare entertain thoughts of resisting Zero Wing on the Eastern continent. However, if Zero Wing returned foiled, many superpowers would begin having designs on Zero Wing. They might even ally with Saint's Hand to deal with Zero Wing. Of course not, Feng said, chuckling. I'm merely saying that you don't need to take action. All you need to do is watch. Just watch. Zhao Yueru looked at Feng in confusion. The guild city in front of them rivaled a main city. How could they possibly capture it just by looking at it? The other Zero Wing members present were also confused, failing to understand what was going through their guild leader's mind. However, Feng did not bother explaining himself. Instead, he flew to an altitude several hundred meters above ancient Rock City and began chanting an incantation, his chanting causing the surrounding mana to swarm toward him. Upon seeing Feng's actions, ancient Rock City's defenders laughed. Are you trying to use a Tier 5 large-scale destruction spell? Beast Emperor sneered as he looked at Feng. This is nothing but a futile struggle. Let alone a Tier 5 sword saint like yourself. Even a Tier 5 divine mage can't do anything against ancient Rock City's defensive magic array. Everyone prepare for battle. Target the flying ship. Beast Emperor ignored Feng's attack, as there was no way weakened Tier 4 attacks could do anything against Feng. However, it was a different story for the Crimson Dragon flying ship. The flying ship wouldn't last long before a barrage of Tier 4 attacks. It would fall quickly even if Zero Wing's Tier 4 experts defended it. The many Tier 4 magical classes atop the city walls promptly began casting their respective spells, while the other Tier 4 ranged classes launched attacks at the flying ship. The 30-plus evil dark dragons took to the skies and bombarded the flying ship. The Zero Wing members aboard the Crimson Dragon flying ship felt an invisible pressure weighing down their bodies. Upon seeing the oncoming attacks, Fire Dance yelled hurriedly, magical classes, deploy defensive magic arrays. Even a Tier 5 legendary monster would suffer if it tried to take on the attacks of more than 100 Tier 4 individuals, let alone Tier 4 players like themselves. Moreover, the Crimson Dragon flying ship only had Tier 4 combat power. However, just as the two sides were about to clash, Feng finished his incantation's final verse. Suddenly, the sky darkened, and a spatial tear spanning over 1,000 yards appeared above ancient Rock City. The spatial tear made it seem as if the sky was about to collapse, inevitably drawing everyone's attention. What is Black Flame trying to do? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU questions filled everyone's mind as they gazed at the gigantic spatial tear. Simultaneously, everyone felt an inexplicable chill overwhelm their heart. They could sense something terrifying in the spatial tear, and this feeling made even their souls shudder with dread. Before anyone could say anything more, a gigantic claw the size of a 4-story building extended from the spatial tear. Subsequently, a titanic figure gradually emerged from the spatial tear, blotting out the sky completely. When everyone eventually discerned the identity of this figure, they were dumbfounded. A dragon? Chapter 2877, Divine Dragon's Might. A Tier 4 dragon? It's a real Tier 4 dragon. Any veteran of God's domain would have heard of the creatures known as dragons. Ancient Rock City's inhabitants, who were at Tier 3 on average, had an even better understanding of dragons. However, when everyone in Ancient Rock City saw the dragon in the sky, they finally understood how terrifying dragons were. The Tier 4 dragon that had just appeared above Ancient Rock City was around 500 meters long, its massive body blotting out the sun. Its aura covered a radius of several thousand yards, making every Tier 3 player in that area shudder involuntarily. Compared to the Tier 4 evil dark dragons protecting Ancient Rock City, this Tier 4 dragon was akin to a god. This is a fake. This must be a fake. How can a player summon a real Tier 4 dragon? The various powers experts standing atop the city walls revealed expressions of shock and horror. A Tier 4 dragon rivaled Tier 5 existences. Current Tier 4 players couldn't afford to provoke it. Likewise, it shouldn't be something players could control. Nevertheless, Feng had summoned a Tier 4 dragon. How could they believe this? This situation was even more unbelievable and shocking than Feng's promotion to Tier 5. After all, given enough time, a dragon would reach Tier 5 without fail. Meanwhile, a Tier 5 dragon was practically an invincible existence in God's domain. Everyone don't panic. While a Tier 4 dragon is scary, Ancient Rock City's defensive magic array isn't weak, either. Saint's Heart's guild leader, Furious Fist, shouted hurriedly when he saw the panicked defenders. It's just one more Tier 5 combatant. So long as we combine our strengths, Black Flame will still be helpless against us. Furious Fist's words calmed Ancient Rock City's experts somewhat. When they remembered how extraordinary the city's defensive magic array was, they felt that defending against Zero Wing's assault wouldn't be impossible. However, regardless of this battle's outcome, most likely nobody in God's domain would dare provoke Zero Wing anymore. Zero Wing would also officially become God's domain's #1 guild. After all, which player force in God's domain could contend against the combination of a Tier 5 player and a Tier 4 dragon? At this time, some of the dark guilds based in Ancient Rock City started regretting making an enemy of Zero Wing. While they might escape tragedy today, thanks to Ancient Rock City, what about the future? They couldn't possibly hide in Ancient Rock City forever, right? While the various dark guilds regretted their decisions, Thousand Miles's complexion turned indescribably ashen as he looked at the dragon in the sky. Noticing Thousand Miles's pallidness, Furious Fist asked, "Vice Guild Leader Miles, what's wrong? Is there a problem with that dragon?" No matter how many times Furious Fist inspected the dragon hovering in the sky with his ordinary identification skill, the result said this dragon was the real deal. Moreover, there was no doubt that the dragon was Tier 4, and it had reached level 165. However, he couldn't get any further information on the dragon without a higher-ranking identification skill. As a Vice Guild Leader of Miracle, Thousand Miles should have a high-ranking identification skill, so it wouldn't be strange if he managed to see some more information. A look of despair appeared on Thousand Miles's face as he said, "That's not just a dragon. That's a divine dragon. A silver divine dragon." Divine dragon? Furious Fist was stunned. Glaring at Thousand Miles, he demanded, "Brother Miles, you're not joking with me, right? If you are, this joke isn't funny at all." Divine dragons were kings among the dragon race. An ordinary dragon and a divine dragon were as different as an ordinary monster and an archaic species. The two were completely different creations. Turning to Furious Fist, Thousand Miles smiled wryly and said, "I wish that were the case, but do you think I'm joking?" Thousand Miles regretted using his high-ranking identification skill on the dragon. Had he not probed any further, he would have held some hope for victory in his heart. Now, though no such hope existed. Meanwhile, when the players who had fled Ancient Rock City gazed at the distant silver divine dragon, they were flabbergasted for a long time. Is this why Zero Wing was confident in attacking Ancient Rock City? A divine dragon? I must be dreaming. That's right. This must be a dream. I just reached Tier 4, so how could Black Flame have reached Tier 5 and gained control over a divine dragon already? This is a dream. Many people began deluding themselves as they looked at the silver divine dragon, none of them willing to face reality. However, Beast Emperor, who stood atop the city gate, had no plans of giving up. Glaring at the divine dragon in the sky, he ranted with a maniacal expression, "Black Flame, so what if you have a divine dragon? My ancient Grandmaster magic array can stop it." The silver divine dragon in the sky suddenly opened its maw before Beast Emperor could continue. The next instant, all mana within a 10,000-yard radius vanished, and everyone within this area felt indescribably stifled. Roar! Accompanied by a deafening roar, a beam of divine light devoured the entire Ancient Rock City. Divine Dragon's Breath. When the dazzling divine light descended upon Ancient Rock City, it forced all players within a radius of several tens of thousands of yards to shield their eyes. The divine light gradually faded away, and only then did everyone open their eyes again to inspect the breath attack's effect. How? Impossible. When the players standing several thousand yards from Ancient Rock City saw the city again, they were utterly dumbfounded. The Divine Dragon's Breath didn't just shatter Ancient Rock City's defensive magic array. It had even vaporized the towering City Lord's mansion at the center of the city along with almost every player and building in the city. Taking their place was a massive crater that spanned the entire city. Only the Tier 4 experts on the city walls who managed to activate their life-saving skills in time and the two Faux Saint Slayers had survived the attack. Everything inside ancient Rock City's perimeter wall had been reduced to a wasteland. No. This isn't possible. Beast Emperor fell into chaos and madness as he looked at what remained of his city. And he wasn't alone. Furious Fist's mind also stopped working at this cataclysmic scene, his body crumbling powerlessly to the ground. BCR/B, all of the investments we've made, all of the forces we've gathered, gone. As if they were nothing but a joke. 1,000 Miles, who had also survived the ordeal, was rendered speechless for a long time. One attack. It had taken just one attack for ancient Rock City, a city rivaling main cities, to disappear. Who could believe this? Zero Wings members aboard the Crimson Dragon flying ship were similarly stunned by this scene. This was especially true for Ji Luorong and Crimson Mask, who had been active on the Western continent until recently. An indescribable sense of shock filled the two. The Western continent had legends describing the dragon's devastating power, and how a single breath attack could destroy entire cities. There were also stories of kingdoms meeting their end, because they had angered a dragon. Previously, Ji Luorong and Crimson Mask treated these stories as mere folklore. Now they finally understood that those stories weren't just legends to embellish God's domain but facts. In reality, even Feng was shocked by this outcome. This is the power of a divine dragon? When Feng saw the ruin before him and Auerbach's nonchalant demeanor, he was momentarily at a loss for words. Feng had seen Tier 6 God-ranked experts single-handedly destroy cities in the past. However, compared to the power displayed by those Tier 6 God-ranked experts, Auerbach's performance gave Feng a much greater shock. This was because Auerbach was only at Tier 4. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Originally, Feng thought that Auerbach's breath attack would, at most, deplete a significant portion of the defensive magic array's energy. Yet the entire city had disappeared. He couldn't help looking at the crazed Beast Emperor apologetically. He even wanted to tell Beast Emperor that he hadn't done this on purpose. Of course, while Feng pitted Beast Emperor, he did not show the latter any mercy. Unsheathing the abyssal blade, he activated the Tier 4 Darkness Bind, binding Beast Emperor and the other surviving defenders. Now that ancient Rock City's defensive magic array was no more, Beast Emperor and the others were subject to the full power of Feng's mana domain. Without the ability to manipulate the ambient mana, Beast Emperor and the others were basically Tier 3 players with above-average basic attributes. Hence, they were utterly incapable of resisting Feng, and got caught easily. And under the restraint of Darkness Bind, they couldn't die even if they wanted to. After Feng destroyed ancient Rock City and captured Beast Emperor and the others, news of this battle spread like wildfire across the entire God's domain. Chapter 2878. Ancient Rock City's Secret Fire Dragon Empire, Flame Dragon City, Mythology's residence. A Tier 3 ranger barged into the meeting room occupied by Mythology's executives, earning the dissatisfaction of Situ Qingtian and the others in the room. Looking at the ranger, Situ Qingtian asked in a displeased tone, "Did something happen?" "It's news of Zero Wing," the ranger said hurriedly. "According to your orders, we've kept tabs on Zero Wing. However, just a moment ago, Zero Wing destroyed ancient Rock City." Upon hearing the ranger's words, Cold Shadow responded dubiously, "Impossible. It's only been around 10 minutes since Zero Wing arrived at ancient Rock City. Even if Black Flame is Tier 5, they can't possibly capture the city so quickly." Ancient Rock City was Beast Emperor's base, and the man had long since armed the city to the teeth. Beast Emperor also had the evil god's temple's backing, a powerful existence capable of going against the war god's temple. Although Feng was a Tier 5 player, capturing ancient Rock City should be tough. No. Vice Guild leader, Zero Wing didn't capture ancient Rock City. It razed the entire city in one blow. Ancient Rock City is now a ruin. The ranger countered, shaking his head. He then took out a magic crystal recorder and placed it on the meeting table. "This is the battle video we received." Immediately, the magic crystal recorder projected the image of a dragon. With just one breath attack, this dragon leveled the entire ancient Rock City, leaving nothing unscathed. A Tier 4 Divine Dragon. It managed to destroy the entire ancient rock city in one hit. Deathly silence enveloped the meeting room momentarily as Mythology's executives stared at the video projection with gloomy expressions. Shock and fear also surfaced in their eyes. Their astonishment was so obvious that even the reporting Tier 3 Ranger could sense it. No wonder he dared refuse our two guilds' partnership. So this is the reason for his confidence. Cold Shadow looked at the Tier 4 Divine Dragon and the ruined ancient rock city in the video with complicated feelings. Feng had been a minor character unworthy of her attention in the past when Zero Wing was a guild reliant on external items to defend its territories. Yet, both Feng and Zero Wing were now bona fide titans that even Mythology could not and would not dare to offend. What was even more laughable was that just a moment ago, Mythology's executives had been discussing how to take revenge on Zero Wing in secret. Now, however, Black Flame, I indeed underestimated you before. Situ Qingtian's gaze grew cold as he looked at the video projection. Repressing the reluctance in his heart, he uttered slowly, "Temporarily halt all retaliation against Zero Wing we discussed before." Practically every superpower in God's domain had heard about Feng killing Situ Qingtian in Zero Wing City. As a result, Situ Qingtian's reputation had taken a nosedive. Although Situ Qingtian yearned to take revenge on Zero Wing, he knew full well that doing so right now would be no different from suicide. With the combined strength of a Tier 5 player and such a frightening divine dragon, Zero Wing could destroy every guild city in God's domain. Damn it. Are we going to let Zero Wing go, just like that? A Mythology executive complained in a hate-filled voice. Situ Qingtian shook his head. Looking at Feng's projected image, he sneered. Of course not. There is only one thing we need to do now, and that is wait. We wait until the start of the Second War. Even if Zero Wing has Black Flame and that divine dragon, it still can't stop the Outer World's advance. Also start searching ancient ruins for clues to the Tier 5 promotion. Spare no cost at all. We must have our own Tier 5. Although Situ Qingtian did not wish to admit it, the era of Tier 4 was already over. Tier 5 players would rule the future. If Mythology did not have its own Tier 5 player, its position as one of the 5 great super guilds would be in danger. Shortly after Situ Qingtian issued his command, the other superpowers of God's domain also issued similar commands. They frantically searched ancient ruins for clues to help their Tier 4 experts get promoted to Tier 5 as quickly as possible, while quietly awaiting the arrival of the Second War of Worlds. Meanwhile, inside the Orc Empire's ancient rock city, Fire Dance and the other Tier 4 experts of Zero Wing finally killed the 2 surviving Faux Saint Slayers. The deaths of the 2 superior mythic monsters granted everyone a generous amount of EXP, and they all managed to gain at least 1 level. However, compared to the EXP the Faux Saint Slayers contributed, Feng was more interested in the pitch-black stones the 2 monsters dropped after death. Previously, whenever players killed mythic-ranked Faux Saint monsters, the player who landed the finishing blow would have a dark gray mist invade their body. This gray mist would increase the player's affinity with mana for a lengthy period. This was also why Feng had not taken action against the Faux Saint Slayers, and had instead allowed Fire Dance and the others to kill the 2 monsters. Yet the 2 Slayers did not release any mist from their bodies. Instead, they each dropped a fist-sized stone. What dense soul energy! Feng was surprised when he spread his senses across the 2 black stones. When his concentration had reached Tier 5, his soul had also undergone a qualitative improvement. It was akin to his soul liquefying. However, compared to the soul energy in the pitch-black stone, his soul energy was nothing. After all, these 2 stones were solidified soul energy. Guild leader, are those things useful? Kola asked curiously as he looked at the black stones in Feng's hands. More than that. Smiling, Feng said to Zero Wing's members, they're even better than fragmented legendary items. Is there anyone here with concentration at the Tier 4 peak standard? After Zero Wing's members exchanged glances, only Violet Cloud stepped forward. Guild leader, my concentration reached the Tier 4 peak standard recently. However, the 2 vice guild leaders should have reached this standard too. Good. Take this soul stone. Afterward, find a quiet place and eat it. It should increase your concentration standard. If you're lucky, you might even raise it to Tier 5, Feng said as he handed one of the black stones to Violet Cloud. He then said to the others, if anyone else manages to reach the Tier 4 peak standard, you can get this soul stone from me. The other Zero Wing members nodded their heads, none of them objecting to Feng's method of distribution. However, when Beast Emperor, who was restrained in a corner, saw Feng's actions, he dearly wanted to strangle Feng to death. Feng was actually treating the two Faux Saint Slayers' cores as a snack, and letting others eat them. This was simply outrageous. He had fed the two Faux Saint Slayers the souls of tens of thousands of Tier 3 players to transform their cores into a soul core. So long as he had a soul core, he could create another Faux Saint Slayer. Yet Violet Cloud received one of these soul cores as a snack. Black Flame. You'll pay for this. Beast Emperor bellowed as he glared at Feng. It doesn't matter even if you caught me. The evil god's temple's rise is already a foregone conclusion. At that time, the Faux Saint army will devour everyone from Zero Wing. Foregone conclusion? Feng laughed. Looking at the restrained Beast Emperor, he pointed at the ruined saint's hand residence in the distance and asked, are you talking about that secret land beneath your guild residence? I don't know what you're talking about. Beast Emperor stammered in a panic. No need to pretend. Do you think Tier 5 is a joke? Feng rolled his eyes at Beast Emperor. While Ancient Rock City's defensive magic array was still active, Feng hadn't been able to sense the secret land's existence. However, with the defensive magic array gone, nothing in Ancient Rock City could hide from his Tier 5 world creation mana domain. Moreover, Feng had already been suspicious about how Beast Emperor had managed to develop Ancient Rock City to its current level. Zero Wing had poured an astronomical amount of resources into developing Stone Forest City and Zero Wing City. Yet the two cities were still stuck as intermediate cities, far from becoming advanced cities. So how did Ancient Rock City develop into an advanced city that was close to becoming a main city? Only a fool wouldn't suspect there was a secret behind this achievement. Black Flame. Beast Emperor was momentarily enraged at Feng's ridicule. However, he soon calmed down and said, so what if you've discovered the evil god's secret land? Do you think you can defend it? Even if you've captured me, I will still spread this information to the entire god's domain. At that time, even the outer world forces will be drawn here. Do you think you can stop all of them? The evil god's secret land was originally his biggest secret, and something he had invested heavily in. This secret land was also why he had gained his current power. Although the evil god's secret land would be of significantly less help to those not belonging to the evil god's temple, the benefits were still enough to drive everyone in God's domain wild. How would I know if I don't try? Suddenly, Feng executed a slash at Furious Fist, instantly killing him. As Furious Fist collapsed reluctantly to the ground and transformed into countless particles of light, two items appeared in his place. Of the two items Furious Fist dropped, one was a piece of epic equipment, while the other was a token. Beast Emperor's complexion paled when he saw the token. This token was none other than Ancient Rock City's City Lord's token. With this token, one could take control of Ancient Rock City. Only Beast Emperor couldn't figure out how Feng knew Furious Fist had held the City Lord's token. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It seems my luck is good. Feng was a little surprised when he saw the City Lord's token. It dropped on the first kill. Beast Emperor nearly fainted when he heard Feng's words. What Beast Emperor didn't know was that aside from Beast Emperor, everyone else held no value as prisoners in Feng's opinion. Meanwhile, the City Lord's token couldn't be taken out of the city. Otherwise, it would be automatically teleported back to the City Lord's mansion after some time. And with how precious the City Lord's token was, Beast Emperor naturally wouldn't leave it to just anyone. The person holding the token would have to be a Tier 4 guild executive of Saint's Hand at the very least. Hence, if Furious Fist hadn't dropped the City Lord's token, Feng would have killed Saint's Hand's Tier 4 experts one by one until it dropped. The instant Feng picked up the City Lord's token, a system notification rang in his ears. Chapter 2879, Colossal Wealth System. Congratulations! You have obtained Ancient Rock City's City Lord's token. Do you wish to bind the token? Once bound, you will become Ancient Rock City's ruler and obtain full authority over the city. Feng chose to bind the token without hesitation. System: binding in progress. You will have full authority over Ancient Rock City after 4 hours. You should not move beyond 1,000 yards from the city during these 4 hours. If you leave this area or get killed during this time, the binding process will be cancelled, and you may not make another binding attempt for 1 natural day. CES 4 hours? Feng was a little surprised by the notification. Has it reached the main city standard already? When one tried to bind the City Lord's token of a guild city, the binding time would depend on the city's rank. Main city-level guild cities normally took 4 to 6 hours to bind. Guild leader, did something happen? Fire Dance asked when she saw Feng's strange expression. It's nothing. I just didn't expect Ancient Rock City to be this special, Feng said, glancing at the raging beast emperor. Smiling, he continued. Since we have to wait for 4 hours, let's pay that evil god's secret land a visit. Black Flame, don't get too delighted just yet. It's useless even if you've obtained Ancient Rock City. That secret land isn't a place you can touch. Without my means of entering, you can't obtain anything inside that secret land. Beast Emperor sneered. I'll spread the secret land's entry methods to all your enemies, and even those outer world people. At that time, you can only watch as they take all of the secret land's treasures right before your eyes. Zero Wing could indeed better defend itself after acquiring Ancient Rock City. However, Beast Emperor also knew very well that the Outer World forces had already deemed Zero Wing an eyesore. Once the Outer World's army arrived, neither Starmoon Kingdom nor the Orc Empire would survive. At that time, the Outer World forces would snatch the evil god's secret land from Feng, and Feng would be helpless to resist them. However, Feng ignored Beast Emperor and led Zero Wing's members to Saint's Hand's residence. Although Ancient Rock City was now in ruins and Saint's Hand's residence had been leveled, the guild warehouse was situated on the first underground floor, so Saint's Hand's guild warehouse remained intact. After Feng's group took care of the 1 Tier 4 NPC and several Tier 3 NPCs guarding the warehouse, they gained full access to it. Everyone from Zero Wing salivated when they stepped into Saint's Hand's guild warehouse. The warehouse, which was the size of 2 sports stadiums, was packed with all sorts of items. Gold coins covered the floor, and magic crystals formed numerous mounds. At a glance, they estimated it held at least 3 million gold coins and 4 million magic crystals. This stockpile of magic crystals was only slightly inferior to Zero Wing's. We're rich. Guild leader, we're rich. Fire Dance exclaimed in excitement as she looked around the warehouse. With all these coins and magic crystals, we won't have to worry about upgrading the buildings of our cities anymore. Zero Wing City's public opening had indeed generated a lot of additional income. Unfortunately, the guild's expenditure still exceeded that amount. This was because Zero Wing City's public opening necessitated an increase in the city's security. The city had to recruit many NPC soldiers to fill as many of the 30,000 slots as possible. While Zero Wing could skim on the benefits provided to the hired soldiers by virtue of Zero Wing City being a main city, the cost of employing level 150 plus, Tier 3 NPCs was still high. With everything taken into account, maintaining a Tier 3 NPC cost 5 gold coins. If Zero Wing City filled all 30,000 of its soldier slots with Tier 3 NPCs, the NPC soldiers' daily upkeep alone would total 150,000 gold. Moreover, this still did not include the NPC's weapons and equipment or the maintenance cost for the Tier 4 NPCs hired. Simply put, Zero Wing's daily expenditure had skyrocketed after Zero Wing City's public opening. At this time, the guild's stockpile of coins was close to empty. Fortunately, thanks to Saint's Hand's contribution, Zero Wing's warehouse would soon be rich again. Seeing Fire Dance's joy, Feng chose to hide the fact that Ancient Rock City's reconstruction would probably eat up all of this money. Zero Wing might even need to provide additional funds. Guild leader, come here quick. There are 7 luminaries crystals here. Blackie said after opening a chest as tall as he was. With glittering eyes he continued. There are at least 50,000 units here. That's even more than what we have. Before Feng left for the Western continent, he had tasked Blackie with acquiring as many 7 luminaries crystals as possible. Hence, Blackie placed particular importance on the crystals. However, Zero Wing's warehouse currently had only around 30,000 units of 7 luminaries crystal despite his efforts. And if it weren't for Zero Wing having a monopoly over the Arctic Canyon, this amount would be even lower. Yet, Saint's Hand's warehouse had more than 50,000 units of 7 luminaries crystal. That's nothing. Blackie, come over to my spot. I'll let you know what real wealth is, shouted Cola, who stood in another corner of the warehouse, as he pointed at the several hill-sized chests beside him. All of these chests here are full of epic materials or above. From what I can tell, there are at least 300,000 epic materials, 20,000 inferior legendary materials, and 3,000 legendary materials. Everyone, including Feng, was stunned when they heard Cola's words. This was on the level of a kingdom's treasury. Ordinary kingdoms might not even reach this standard. Only high-ranking kingdoms would have so many rare materials. However, upon hearing Cola's words, Beast Emperor, who had been dragged along to the warehouse, turned livid, his eyes becoming bloodshot. He had accumulated these materials by ransacking multiple kingdoms with the Faux Saint army and destroying numerous NPC cities. Yet, all his efforts had ended up benefiting Zero Wing. Afterward, Feng tasked Blackie with sweeping through the warehouse and transporting everything back to the guild warehouse in Zero Wing City. He then brought Fire Dance and the others to a secret room on the 2nd underground floor. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The secret room was only the size of a basketball court, with a pitch-black door in the middle of it. Upon entering the room, Fire Dance and the others felt an incomparably powerful pressure enveloping their bodies. Fire Dance had unlocked her mana body beyond the 110% completion rate already, yet even she had difficulty walking inside the secret room. After 3 steps, the pressure was so strong that she couldn't move her body. If an ordinary Tier 4 player were to enter this room, they would most likely crumple to the floor, unable to advance even a single step. Ha ha ha. I already said that you people would never be able to touch the evil god's secret land. Beast Emperor laughed when he saw Fire Dance and the others immobilized. He then looked at Feng and taunted, Black Flame, it's the same even if you're Tier 5. Without my special method, none of you should think of entering. Beast Emperor had reached the peak of Tier 4 already. He also had the benefit of being an evil god worshipper. Nevertheless, he still struggled to enter the evil god's secret land. This was why Beast Emperor was confident that Feng would be helpless against the evil god's secret land, even though he had discovered its existence. Is that so? Feng stepped into the secret room after glancing at the laughing Beast Emperor. Chapter 2880, God Mode Secret Land. What bold words! I want to see just how far you can go. Beast Emperor watched with ridicule and complacency as Feng entered the secret room. He was fully confident that the evil god's secret land would repel Feng. However, after Feng entered the room, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, apparently unhindered by the oppression the pitch-black door exerted, Feng advanced 20 steps without stopping. He showed no signs of discomfort whatsoever. It was as if the pressure that rendered even experts at the peak of Tier 4 helpless was nothing to him. Confusion flooded Beast Emperor's heart as he looked at Feng. What's going on? When Feng arrived before the pitch-black door, let alone Beast Emperor, even Fire Dance and the others were stunned. How did you do it, guild leader? Fire Dance asked, unable to contain her curiosity. The intensity of the pressure she felt from the secret room was unprecedented. Even the divine might she experienced in Lightforge City could not compare. After taking 3 steps into the room, she could no longer advance by even another inch. She couldn't even lift her feet. While Tier 5 players were indeed stronger than Tier 4 players, the disparity shouldn't be so significant. Logically, there was no way Feng would remain unaffected by the room's oppression. At Fire Dance's question, the other Zero Wing members also looked at Feng curiously. How did I do it? Seeing everyone's curious expressions, Feng smiled faintly and said, I just walked here, of course. However, I did use a little technique. Technique? The Zero Wing members were momentarily stunned. They hadn't seen anything peculiar about Feng's gait. He had merely walked to the door in a normal fashion. Moreover, how could a technique completely mitigate such terrifying pressure? However, when Beast Emperor heard Feng's words, he stared at the latter as if he had just seen a ghost. No. Impossible. Who are you? How can you know such a technique? There was indeed a trick to approaching the pitch-black door. However, Beast Emperor had never told anyone this trick. He was the only player in God's domain who knew it. Moreover, even if one knew the trick, one still couldn't approach the door without the evil god's blessing. Feng couldn't help rolling his eyes at Beast Emperor. The technique required to approach this door is indeed complicated. But do you think the fundamental technique to manipulate the various elements of mana is unique to the evil god's temple? When Feng saw the pitch-black door and the hurdle fire dance and the others faced after entering the secret room, he quickly noticed a similarity between the secret room and the Dragon Temple's trial area. In the Dragon Temple's trial, players had to construct a bridge using mana's various elements. The secret room, on the other hand, was filled with chaotic mana. The closer to the pitch-black door, the more chaotic the ambient mana was. What players needed to do was return this chaotic mana to its original state. Only by doing so could players approach the door. Simply put, both places tested players' usage of the various elements of mana. For Feng, who had already mastered the basic usage of the various elements of mana, approaching the pitch-black door was a walk in the park. It was much easier than the trial in the Dragon Temple, which had required him to expend a lot of concentration and manipulate a significant amount of mana. The secret room, on the other hand, did not put a burden on his concentration or require him to manipulate a lot of mana. The secret land aside, this room is quite a good training spot for those seeking to learn the basic usage of the various elements of mana. Scrutinizing the secret room, Feng said happily, I was worrying about how to help everyone accomplish this, so this saves me a lot of time. It wasn't easy to learn to manipulate the various elements of mana independently. Even if he provided Zero Wings members with an explanation, the learning process would be highly inefficient without a reference. They could be taking a dead end for all they knew. The secret room just so happened to provide players with an environment for testing their application of the various elements of mana. It was undoubtedly a precious training ground. One would also have an easier time getting promoted to Tier 5 if they trained here, as having the ability to manipulate the individual elements of mana was crucial in constructing a Tier 5 mana body. When Beast Emperor heard Feng's words, he promptly fainted. Ignoring the unconscious Beast Emperor, Feng set his sights on the pitch-black door. The door was 5 meters tall and 2 meters wide, made of a material Feng didn't recognize. When he opened the door, a pitch-black whirlpool greeted him. The vortex exuded divine might, and players at Tier 4 or below shouldn't even think of setting foot into this whirlpool. After Feng inspected the whirlpool with omniscient eyes, a few lines of information appeared before him. Evil God's Secret Land, God Mode Secret Land Raid Level 150 to 200. What a powerful secret land. The displayed information astonished Feng. Now he understood why Beast Emperor was confident he couldn't obtain the evil god's secret land. Secret lands were like dungeons in God's domain. The higher their ranking, the higher their raid difficulty. God mode was the highest difficulty for secret lands. Unlike dungeons, though, secret lands would not reset. According to Feng's memories, there were less than 10 level 150 plus God mode secret lands in the entire God's domain. Meanwhile, even Tier 6 God-ranked experts could fall in a level 150 plus God mode secret land. However, countless player forces would seek to enter a level 150 plus God mode secret land. It was also a place all Tier 5 players had to enter. This was because these secret lands held clues to the Tier 6 promotion. Which player who had climbed to Tier 5 wouldn't wish to advance further and reach Tier 6? Hence, God's domain's various forces would fight over any level 150 plus God mode secret land that appeared. It seems I'll now have to defend ancient Rock City, no matter what. Feng sighed as he looked at the evil god's secret land. Due to the Outerworld Forces invasion, he had intended to defend ancient Rock City only temporarily. After all, Zero Wing had limited combat power. In its current state, just defending the guild cities it already had from the Outer Worlds player and NPC forces would be difficult. Adding ancient Rock City to the list would only make things even more difficult for the guild. However, the evil god's secret land was extraordinary. Feng might have ignored it if it were only an Azura mode secret land. But a level 150 plus god mode secret land was something he had to protect at all costs. After all, finding another secret land of such caliber wouldn't be easy, even for him. The entrances of level 150 plus god mode secret lands typically appeared at random locations, and existed for only a set period. Thus, none of the superpowers in his previous life had ever managed to occupy a level 150 plus god mode secret land. On the other hand, the entrance to the evil god's secret land in ancient Rock City was fixed. This increased the entrance's value drastically. Moreover, this evil god's secret land might very well hold the key to Feng's promotion to Tier 6. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Following this, Zero Wing's logistics members began ransacking Saint's Hand's warehouse, while Feng taught Fire Dance, and the others the fundamental technique to manipulate mana's various elements. Like so, 4 hours went by in the blink of an eye, and Feng received a notification. System. Congratulations. You have become Ancient Rock City's ruler. Do you wish to reconstruct Ancient Rock City? Reconstruct. Feng said in a determined tone. System. A god mode secret land has been discovered. Do you wish to integrate the secret land with Ancient Rock City? Chapter 2881, Integration Integrate. Feng grew confused as he read the system notification. This was the first time he had heard of a secret land being integrated with a guild city. He had seen many player forces constructing guild cities on top of precious secret lands in the past. However, even as these guild cities developed, they never received any opportunity to merge with these secret lands directly. For a moment, Feng hesitated. The evil god's secret land was a level 150 plus god mode secret land. If he recklessly merged it with ancient Rock City and the secret land disappeared, he would suffer a huge loss. However, before Feng could ponder things further, he received another system notification. System. It is detected that you have 3 million magic crystals and 5,007 luminaries crystals on your person. You have fulfilled the conditions to reconstruct ancient Rock City with the evil god's secret land as the core. Do you wish to integrate the secret land and upgrade the city? Agree. Feng agreed without hesitation when he heard the contents of the notification. There were several holy cities in God's domain, and one of these holy cities had a god mode secret land as its core. The War God's Temple had also established its main headquarters in this holy city. Sanctuary. This sacred place was also why all Tier 5 experts sought to visit the top of the world. Sanctuary was the sole ancient city in God's domain that players had verified to hold clues to the Tier 6 promotion. The city was so old that nobody could ascertain its age in this modern day. Rumor had it that any Tier 4 player that entered Sanctuary had a 100% chance of getting promoted to Tier 5. However, what made Sanctuary amazing wasn't the knowledge it stored. Instead, the Holy City held complete control over a level 150 plus God mode secret land. Players that gained sufficient authority in the city, even Tier 3 players, could enter the secret land. It was different from the God mode secret lands found in the outside world, where the minimum entry requirement was Tier 4 because of the suppression of divine might. Although great dangers existed in a God mode secret land, they weren't everywhere. Moreover, the environment inside level 150 plus God mode secret lands was different from the outside world, resembling that of ancient times, the era abounding with gods. Hence, entering a God mode secret land was an excellent opportunity even for low-tier players. Now that ancient Rock City could become another sanctuary, how could Feng possibly turn down this opportunity? After Feng voiced his approval, some of the magic crystals and 7 luminaries crystals he had acquired from Saint's Hand's warehouse vanished from his bag space. Simultaneously, Ancient Rock City shook briefly. Ancient Rock City Region System Announcement. Ancient Rock City will commence with an upgrade. All players within Ancient Rock City will be teleported out of the city in 10 minutes. Players within the city are advised to make the necessary preparations. The system announcement echoed 3 times throughout the region. Subsequently, Feng received a personal system notification. System: Ancient Rock City's upgrade is estimated to take 1 natural day. As you hold Ancient Rock City's City Lord's token, you may not move more than 3,000 yards away from the city. You can also choose to log off and rest. Why is it so long? Feng was rendered speechless by the notification. A guild city's upgrade would typically take only several hours. Nevertheless, Ancient Rock City needed 1 day for its advancement. By the time the city was ready, Beast Emperor would have long since spread the evil god's secret land's information to all of God's domain. And worse, Ancient Rock City would be at its weakest after the reconstruction and upgrade process. Before the system's first major update, guild cities got a grace period whenever they underwent an upgrade. Now guild cities no longer received that benefit. Players had to defend their cities on their own. If the outer world forces were determined, Ancient Rock City might be greeted with a battle as soon as its reconstruction ended. At this time, Fire Dance looked toward Feng and asked, "Guild leader, we've emptied Saint's Hand's warehouse already. Should we retreat now?" "No, bring Beast Emperor and the other captives back to Silverwing City first," Feng replied, shaking his head. "Also, have Liang Jing gather the necessary manpower in Silverwing City ahead of time. As soon as Ancient Rock City opens, have them garrison the city immediately." "Yes, sir." Upon hearing Feng's words, Fire Dance understood that trouble would accompany Ancient Rock City's promotion. There might even be a big battle awaiting the city. She immediately set out to execute his orders. After Fire Dance left Ancient Rock City, Feng chose to log off and rest. He had been busy with various tasks previously, so he hadn't had a chance to take a break from the game. Now that the system had prohibited him from leaving Ancient Rock City's vicinity, he could use this opportunity to rest up. Yuantian City's upper zone, 6th Southern District. The Fearless cabin's hatch opened slowly, and Feng climbed out of the gaming cabin. The instant Feng exited the cabin, dizziness assaulted him. He very nearly fell back into the cabin. What's going on? As the world spun before him, Feng felt an indescribable hunger. Confused, he wondered, are my mind and body failing to adapt because I spent too much time in the Dragon Temple? However, Feng dared not ponder on this matter for too long, because he knew there was only one thing he needed to do right now: eat. He had experienced this hunger once before, so he knew that his anemic symptoms resulted from his body lacking energy. Fortunately, Feng had prepared for such situations. After Zero Wing partnered with the Boulder Corporation, the latter had given Zero Wing 30 bottles of life potion. Feng had distributed most of them to Zero Wing's executives, but kept 5 for himself as a precaution. This situation was precisely when he needed to use those life potions. Feng emptied 2 bottles of life potion in the blink of an eye. However, although the anemic symptoms he suffered eased, his mind and body still lacked energy. Only after downing the 5th bottle did Feng feel himself reviving. "Thank goodness I prepared 5 bottles. I wouldn't have recovered from this predicament with only 4. Feng couldn't help sighing deeply as he looked at the empty bottles in front of him. These 5 bottles of life potion should have lasted him 2 months. Now he had finished all 5 in one fell swoop. If Mushin and Kuruei found out about this, they would have a heart attack. After all, this was half a year's worth of provisions for them. However, while Feng felt heartache over the consumption, he also felt completely reinvigorated. His physical fitness, mental strength, perception, and physical aspects had undergone tremendous growth. Now, even with both eyes closed, he could still perceive the outline of his room. He could even sense the life force of those in the entire building block if he concentrated. This was simply unbelievable. Could I have become a mental strength master already? This thought occurred to Feng when he detected the life force of others in the building. He couldn't think of any other explanation for this change. Only the rumored mental strength masters might have such an ability. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU at this time, Even his view of the world had changed. After Feng immersed himself in this experience for a dozen minutes, he smiled. Although I don't know if I've become a mental strength master or not, with my current standard, I shouldn't have to worry about the mental strength master backing Lu Tiandi. Thinking up to this point, Feng tidied up himself and left his house. He planned to visit the 5 States Corporation's mansion to replenish the resources necessary for both his and Zero Wing's development. Previously, he had been worried about Lu Tiandi's mentor targeting him, so he hadn't dared to venture too far from his residential area. Now that his strength had improved significantly, he naturally didn't have to hold back anymore. He could do his tasks without worry. Chapter 2882, Upper Zone Transaction. When Feng exited his home and looked at the surrounding streets and buildings, a faint smile appeared on his face. How generous. He actually sent over a dozen half-step grandmasters to keep an eye on me. He had been living in the upper zone for quite some time now. After getting more information from Mushin, he more or less understood the general situation in the upper zone. While master-level experts could be found everywhere, experts at the half-step grandmaster level were even in the upper zone. They were the mainstays of the various upper zone organizations. Normally, only the direct successors of a corporation would qualify to have an expert of such caliber accompany them. Typically, only a first-rate corporation operating in the upper zone would have more than a dozen half-step grandmasters under its command. However, Feng did not pay much attention to the experts trailing him. Behaving as if he never noticed them, he made his way toward the mansion area with a smile. Butler E, that kid clearly noticed us. Yet he doesn't seem to care about us for some reason. A black-clad, middle-aged man standing on the rooftop of an apartment said as he looked at Feng's departing back. He then turned to Ikue, who stood beside him, and asked, "Does he have some kind of backing?" The Infinity Master Fu Jiuzhong had been thoroughly enraged when he learned of his student Wang Xuanming's expulsion from the upper zone. Afterward, he had requested the elders of the several families in his debt to keep an eye on Feng. And if the opportunity presented itself, they were to get rid of Feng. Naturally, the elders of the requested families were more than willing to sell Fu Jiuzhong this favor. After all, according to their investigations, Feng had no background. He had managed to get into the upper zone only because of the Boulder Corporation's Hong Xingyuan. The only noteworthy thing about him was some achievements in God's domain. In response to the black-clad man's question, Ikue shook his head and said, "From what I know, apart from the Boulder Corporation, his only other connection in the upper zone is General Manager Xia. However, her interest in him hasn't reached a level where she is willing to make an enemy of us for his sake. He might be ignoring us now because of the strengthened security around him. If that's the case, this kid's days are numbered," the middle-aged man said as he looked coldly at Feng's distant figure. In a duel between two grandmasters, it would indeed be difficult to decide the match's outcome within a short time. However, their side had 6 half-step Honglian grandmasters and 8 grandmasters. 3 of the 8 grandmasters were even bona fide Honglian grandmasters. If they worked together, even an expert like Wang Xianming would fall quickly and have no opportunity to escape. In that case, I'll leave the rest to you all, Elder Qi. I will wait here for your good news," Ikue said respectfully to the black-clad middle-aged man. Elder Qi was the elder of a first-rate corporation. Although he could no longer improve due to his old age, he was still a Honglian grandmaster. His strength even surpassed Wang Xuanming slightly. If not for Fu Jiuzhong, Elder Qi wouldn't have paid any attention to the Starline Corporation whatsoever. "No problem. Leave it to us. Once we get an opportunity, we'll cripple him," Elder Qi said as he stroked his beard. "We'll teach this kid that he can't offend just anyone he wants in the upper zone." The upper zone was indeed a safe place, as even mental strength masters wouldn't dare take a life here. Otherwise, the Green God Company would investigate the matter. Even a mental strength master shouldn't think of continuing their days in the upper zone at that time, because this was the Green God Company's bottom line. However, teaching someone a lesson or crippling them was a different story. If the Green God Company did not catch the culprit red-handed, it would turn a blind eye to the matter. After all, so long as a person was alive, The Green God Company could let them make a full recovery within a short time with their technology. After saying so, Elder Qi began tailing Feng, together with the other experts. Upper Zone Mansion District. After strolling in the Mansion District for half an hour, Feng arrived in front of a 3-story mansion that occupied an area equivalent to 4 basketball courts. As expected of the 5 States Corporation, there are only 10 such mansions in this district. Even the Boulder Corporation didn't manage to get one. No wonder Han Yifeng dares to compete for one of the middle-layer slots. Feng couldn't help his surprise as he inspected the luxurious mansion before him. He had seen the pricing for such large mansions. Not only did it cost 140 million trade points, but one also had to have 100 million contribution points. While one wouldn't be required to spend the 100 million contribution points, accumulating that many points was an incredibly difficult task. Meanwhile, such large mansions were much better than the average mansion. Apart from offering more space, these mansions also stood closer to the waist of the mountain. In the base layer, they were the closest buildings to the middle layer. Hence, the mysterious energy filling the environment here was much denser than in other places. After Feng took a deep breath here, his mind already felt refreshed. He felt as if he had set foot into paradise on earth. Shortly after Feng pressed the doorbell, the tightly shut metal gate opened, and a person walked out. This person was none other than Zhuo Linqiu, Han Yifeng's butler. Looking at Feng, Zhuo Linqiu asked, "Mr. Shi, may I know what business you have with us today?" "It's about the agreement young Master Han and I made," Feng replied calmly. "As per our agreement, I have come to do business with young Master Han." "Business? Please follow me." Zhuo Linqiu nodded and led Feng into the mansion. When Feng entered the mansion, he immediately noticed several young men and women training under an elderly man in the mansion's outdoor training ground. The elderly man wore a martial arts robe. Although he had a head of white hair, the aura he exuded was more powerful than what Feng had sensed from Wang Xianming previously. Upon Feng's arrival, the young men and women turned to look at him curiously, wondering who Feng was for the 5 States Corporation to treat him as a guest. However, after getting berated by their elderly instructor, they promptly focused on their training again. It seems I really can't underestimate the 5 States Corporation. Feng was surprised when he spread his senses across the mansion. There are 6 grandmasters and more than 10 half-step grandmasters in this mansion alone. Even the Boulder Corporation doesn't have this many experts. After guiding Feng to a reception room on the 3rd floor, Zhuo Linqiu pushed apart the wooden doors to the room and said, "Mr. Shi, the young master is waiting inside." Feng nodded and walked into the room. He found Han Yifeng seated behind a solid wood desk with his eyes closed. Currently, Han Yifeng did not exude the slightest bit of aura, and felt no different from an ordinary person. Compared to the last time Feng had met him, Han Yifeng's aura had changed dramatically. Upon sensing Feng's arrival, Han Yifeng opened his eyes. Revealing a faint smile, Han Yifeng said, "Brother Shi, I didn't think you would come to find me so soon. I expected you would wait for the last 10 days to get a better price." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. At this point, Feng's name was already known throughout Yuantian City's upper zone. Not only was he the cause of Wang Xuanming's banishment from the upper zone, but he was even Zero Wing's guild leader. The resources he had on hand tempted many of the corporations participating in this season's contribution competition. If not for Wang Xuanming's teacher, Fu Jiuzhong, many of the corporations based in Yuantian City's upper zone would have long since visited Feng and proposed a partnership. I doubt that will happen. I know I am not your only source of contribution points, young Master Han. Had I waited until the last moment, I probably would have gotten a lower price instead. You might not even have wanted my points at that time, Feng said, shaking his head. Originally, Feng had indeed considered waiting for a better price. Now though he couldn't afford the delay, Zero Wing urgently needed a large amount of resources, especially life potions. The life potion was the perfect drug to improve one's physical fitness. If not for the limitation of physical fitness, Fire Dance, Lei Bao, and several other people in Zero Wing would have long since become neutralizing grandmasters. Brother, sure you jest. In that case, we'll proceed with the 2-to-1 ratio we previously agreed on. I'll buy however many points you have, Han Feng said, chuckling. However, Feng shook his head and countered in a determined voice. No, I want a 1-to-1 ratio. Chapter 2883. Overnight Fortune 1-to-1. Han Feng frowned. Brother, sure, isn't your asking price a little too high? At this time, Han Feng wasn't the only one dissatisfied. Standing by the door, Zhuolinqiu looked at Feng with a hint of anger and ridicule in his eyes. A 1-to-1 exchange ratio was something no organization operating in Yuantian City's upper zone would accept. Life potions and phantom potions served as an organization's foundation. Their stockpile was also something accumulated over many years. These potions weren't items that one could obtain on a whim. Yet, Feng wanted to purchase these precious potions at a 1-to-1 exchange rate. Did he take the Five States Corporation for a fool? The Five States Corporation had many sources for contribution points. Meanwhile, these sources only sought a 2-to-1 ratio. On what basis was Feng asking for a 1-to-1 ratio? Young Master Han, don't be in a hurry to refuse, Feng said, smiling as he looked at Han Feng's cold expression. A 1-to-1 ratio is a fair price. A fair price? Han Feng laughed. May I know how you think it is fair, brother, sure? Because I can guarantee you a slot to enter the middle layer, young Master Han. Feng said confidently. Do you think this is a fair deal now? At Feng's words, Han Feng's cold expression changed slightly. However, he quickly recollected himself and asked, Those are some confident words, brother, sure. If what you say is true, I can consider a 1-to-1 ratio. May I know what exactly you are counting on to help me? 600,000 contribution points. That combined with the points you already have. While I don't know if you can secure first place, getting within the top 3 shouldn't be a problem, right? According to Mushin's information, the top 3 rankers' limit should be around 1 million contribution points. It would be difficult for them to acquire more than this, because one could earn only so many contribution points through real-world resources. The only other way these top rankers could acquire more points would be to obtain many 7 Luminaries crystals in God's domain. However, 7 Luminaries crystals were incredibly precious in God's domain, and even the various superpowers barely had any. B. Feng estimated that acquiring 800,000 contribution points shouldn't be a problem for the Five States Corporation. If the corporation included his 600,000 points, it could secure one of the top 3 spots with a 100% certainty. When Feng finished speaking, Zhuolinqiu couldn't help staring at Feng in disbelief, his eyes very nearly falling out of their sockets. Each of the Five States Corporation's point sources could contribute only several tens of thousands of contribution points. After totaling the points from all sources, the corporation should gain around 600,000 contribution points. Not to mention, these sources would not necessarily sell all their points to the Five States Corporation. After all, the upper zone's various organizations were purchasing contribution points at a high price. The Five States Corporation would be fortunate if it could acquire 400,000 contribution points in the end. However, if the corporation could gain an additional 600,000 contribution points now, it could secure one of the top 3 spots in the competition. At this time, even Han Feng was visibly moved. 600,000. He has this much strength? In Han Feng's opinion, taking out 200,000 contribution points would be plenty impressive already. After all, 7 Luminaries crystals were not easy to acquire in God's domain. Feng had even traded some with him already. With 600,000 contribution points as his base, Feng could even try to fight for one of the top 3 positions himself. Feng smiled when he saw Han Feng's reaction. He then asked, What do you think, young Master Han? If Han Feng had 1 million contribution points as his base, all he needed to do next was acquire another 300,000 points or so to solidify his victory. After pondering for a moment, Han Feng gritted his teeth and said, That is indeed sufficient qualification. However, a 1-to-1 ratio is still too much. The Five States Corporation can't take out so many potions in a short time. If converted to trade points, 600,000 contribution points would be worth 60 million trade points. And when converted to life potions, that would be equivalent to 12,000 life potions. This was by no means a trifling amount. Feng didn't find Han Yifeng's words surprising, either. Instead, he chuckled and said, "If that's the case, how about this? I'll only ask for 2,000 potions. I'll exchange the remainder for a large mansion in the upper zone. What do you think?" I recall that the Five States Corporation still has the authority to purchase another one. The base layer had only 10 large mansions, and only 8 had owners. After some research, Feng found that these large mansions were excellent accommodations. Not only could they house 40 people easily, but the strange energy in the air was also much denser in these large mansions. This denser energy would be of greater help in stabilizing gentle snow and Aqua Rose's condition. Feng, don't go too far. Zhuolinqiu blurted angrily. A 1-to-1 ratio is already an astronomical price. Yet, you're asking for a large mansion that's worth 140 million trade points? Do you take the Five States Corporation for a fool? The value of 10,000 life potions was equivalent to only 50 million trade points, a little more than 1/3 of a large mansion's value. Feng's terms were no different from daylight robbery. My asking price is indeed a little excessive, but purchasing a large mansion doesn't require you to spend contribution points. You only need to have accumulated 100 million contribution points. Meanwhile, not only will my 7 luminaries crystals provide you with contribution points, but they will also provide you with an ample amount of trade points. Exchanging a large mansion for these crystals wouldn't be a loss for your corporation, Feng said. Of course, if your corporation isn't willing to do this transaction, I can find someone else to partner with. I believe the other people competing for the top 3 spots will be interested in my proposal. Zhuolinqiu was momentarily rendered speechless by Feng. What Feng said was indeed true. Contribution points were far more important than trade points, especially in the middle layer. Moreover, compared to contribution points, trade points were much easier to acquire. That's enough, old Zhuo. Han Yifeng shot a glance at his butler, silencing him. He then returned his gaze to Feng and said, "I agree to your offer. However, I will need time to acquire the large mansion. As for the potions, I can give you 1,000 bottles now. I will pay you the remaining 1,000 bottles, and the large mansion within the next 5 days. What do you think?" "Sure, I don't have any problem with that." Feng nodded. In Feng's opinion, the 5 days Han Yifeng stated were only a ploy. Han Yifeng wanted to purchase as many contribution points as possible from his other sources during these 5 days, because once news of his acquisition of 600,000 contribution points spread, purchasing points would become much more difficult. Afterward, Han Yifeng signed a contract with Feng. According to the agreement, Feng would transfer 60,000 7 luminaries crystals to Han Yifeng through God's domain within half a day. At the same time, Han Yifeng would pay Feng 1,500 bottles of life potion, 500 bottles of phantom potion, and 1 large mansion in return. With the contract signed, Han Yifeng had Zhuolinqiu pass 100 bottles of life potion to Feng, with the rest to be delivered secretly to Feng's house. After concluding the deal, Feng left the Five States Corporation's mansion with a crate of life potions. Meanwhile, after Feng left, Zhuolinqiu turned to Han Yifeng and warned quietly, "Young master, your elders will criticize you if they find out you made such an unfavorable deal." "Criticize?" Sending Zhuolinqiu a glance, Han Yifeng sneered. "So long as I get into the middle layer, do you think I'll care about what they have to say?" Everyone living in the base layer wished to enter the middle layer. The environment there far surpassed the base layers. The middle layer was also home to many mental strength masters. If he could befriend even one of these masters, his position within the Five States Corporation would become unshakable. At that time, would he have to care about the criticisms of his elders? Gazing through the window at the distant middle layer with eyes burning with zeal, Han Yifeng said, "Head out and purchase contribution points from those organizations immediately. It doesn't matter even if you have to offer them a 1. 5-to-1 ratio. While Feng was secretly going around purchasing contribution points from various organizations, Feng left the upper zone together with his crate of life potions. Previously, despite receiving the secret pavilions and Netherworld Empire's guild legacies, Zero Wing could afford to nurture only a small number of experts due to its limited resources. However, now that Zero Wing had sufficient life potions, let alone Void Realm experts, the guild could nurture even Domain Realm experts within a short time. This was something even the various superpowers couldn't accomplish. After all, when nurturing new talents, the superpowers would provide only S-rank nutrient fluids at most, not something as precious as the life potion. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Meanwhile, when Feng left the upper zone, Elder Qi and the others stalking him were stunned. Is this kid crazy? A Honglian Grandmaster asked when he saw Feng entering the mental path. He dares to leave the upper zone at this time? Could it be that he didn't notice us in the first place? A lanky neutralizing Grandmaster wondered. There's no way he hasn't noticed us. I am certain on this point. Elder Qi declared. Looking at Feng's distant figure coldly, he continued. He's looking down on us. Since he's so arrogant, I'll fulfill his wish. Everyone, get ready to take action outside. I want to see what ability this kid has. After saying so, Elder Qi promptly set off after Feng. The other experts followed Elder Qi after briefly exchanging looks with one another. Chapter 2884. Ruthless Feng Fenglin City, Zero Wing's headquarters. Feng stood in front of Zero Wing's headquarters. The place had undergone significant changes since his last visit. Currently, people crowded the plaza in front of the building, many of them young men and women. These people were either waiting to enter the building, or taking various tests out in the plaza. This prosperous sight was even more spectacular than what could be found at the various super guilds' headquarters. As Feng made his way to the entrance, he overheard these young men and women discussing Zero Wing's matters. As they spoke about Zero Wing City's training environment, or the heaven-defying battle that had taken place at Ancient Rock City, their eyes glowed with anticipation. Before Feng could reach the entrance, a long-haired man in his 30s approached him. Looking at Feng, who was clad in sportswear, the long-haired man said in a friendly tone, "Friend, you're here to join Zero Wing, right?" "Me? Join Zero Wing?" Feng was stunned by the long-haired man's words. Although the long-haired man looked ordinary, Feng sensed intense life force from him. In terms of physical fitness, the long-haired man could practically rival Honglian masters. However, before Feng could say anything, the long-haired man unzipped his jacket and revealed a six-winged emblem pinned on his t-shirt, proving that he was an internal member of Zero Wing. "I can tell that you're extraordinary at a glance, brother," the long-haired man said while showing off his emblem. He then pointed at the long line of people waiting to enter the building and grinned, saying, "Look at how long that line is. If you grab a ticket and join the line now, it'll take you forever before your turn arrives. However, I'm an internal member of Zero Wing. I have a recommendation slot that lets me help one person bypass the initial test." "What are you trying to say?" Feng asked curiously. "I can see that you're extraordinary, so I plan to recommend you to the guild. However, once you become an internal member of Zero Wing, you'll need to join my team. What do you think?" Looking at Feng with a serious look, the long-haired man said earnestly, "The team I belong to is extraordinary. Although it was established only recently, it has become a second-line team already. It's only one line behind the main force." Feng was at a loss for words. He never imagined such competition existed between Zero Wing's various teams. If he weren't Zero Wing's guild leader, he would have most likely been tempted by the long-haired man's words already. After all, apart from Zero Wing's main force, any other team that had a Tier 4 player leading it would be considered a second-line team. Meanwhile, all second-line teams could raid level 150, 100-man hard-mode team dungeons. What? You don't believe me? Upon seeing Feng's startled expression, the long-haired man said delightedly, "Do you know who my team leader is? You'll get a fright if I tell you." Just when Feng wondered who this strange man's team leader was, The sounds of fighting came from inside the lobby. The din was like a sledgehammer pounding the ground. However, neither the long-haired man nor the other Zero Wing members present showed any concern over these loud sounds, appearing wholly accustomed to them. The newcomers, though, all expressed curiosity and tried sneaking peeks into the lobby. "Ignore that. It's nothing to fuss about," the long-haired man said when he saw the curiosity on Feng's face. He then added nonchalantly, "It's just the experts of another superpower coming to provoke Zero Wing. I believe Master Lei Bao will take care of them in a moment." Feng asked, "Have there been a lot of such situations happening in Zero Wing lately?" "It's been like this since before I joined. However, it's become much more frequent recently," the long-haired man said as he nodded in frustration. "These superpowers can't bear to see Zero Wing developing. However, as they can't do anything to us in God's domain, they keep coming to our headquarters to make trouble. They keep asking us to sell them Zero Wing City's lands. I heard that the group that came here this time consists of 6 superpowers, one of them the Super Guild Mythology. Mythology's group is even led by the Feng family's young lady. That Feng Shihan really is something. Not only is she beautiful, but she's also frighteningly strong. She can take down master-level experts in practically one hit. I'm afraid only our big sis Fire Dance can take her on." The long-haired man shuddered when he spoke of Feng Shihan. It was evident he feared the latter greatly. After the long-haired man finished speaking, the lobby's door opened abruptly, and a group of people stalked out of the building. These people were representatives of superpowers, and they currently had angry expressions. However, when they looked at Fire Dance and Lei Bao, who walked out of the building shortly after them, and then looked at the injured master-level experts and one half-step neutralizing grandmaster beside them, they dared not do anything. "Just you wait. Don't think that, just because we are helpless against you in God's domain, you'll be invincible in the real world as well. Zero Wing will only encounter more trouble for refusing to cooperate with us." The various superpowers representatives barked arrogantly at Fire Dance and Lei Bao, their voices growing complacent as they spoke. While master-level experts might be powerless against Zero Wing, there were bound to be superpowers capable of inviting grandmaster-level experts to move for them. The corporations operating within the upper zone might even take action. After all, Zero Wing was too large a cake to pass on. According to the information the various superpowers had gathered, some forces based in the upper zone were already investigating Zero Wing, evidently interested in the guild. Hence, it was only a matter of time before Grandmaster-level experts came to find trouble with Zero Wing. Fire Dance and Lei Bao revealed somewhat grim expressions on their faces when they heard the representative's words. They had expected the battle at Ancient Rock City to have caught the attention of many organizations in the upper zone. Hence, they were certain that Grandmaster-level experts would eventually come to Zero Wing seeking trouble. While these Grandmasters might not be capable of doing anything against Zero Wing on the surface, if they came every day to pick a fight, it would ruin Zero Wing's reputation, not to mention the other unscrupulous tactics they could employ. However, when the various superpowers representatives were getting full of themselves, Feng Shihan suddenly left the group and headed toward Feng. The cold gaze she directed at him made the temperature in the surroundings fall by more than 10 degrees. The long-haired man standing beside Feng shuddered in fear despite himself. Looking at Feng, the long-haired man asked, "Friend, did you offend her in some way before? Why do I get the feeling that she's coming for you?" In this situation, the nearby young men also looked at Feng and began a quiet discussion. They all wondered who Feng was to warrant such attention from a great beauty like Feng Shihan. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I don't think I've done anything to her," Feng said. He likewise found it strange that Feng Shihan was walking to him. After giving the matter some thought, he added, "The only things I remember doing are killing one of her elders and telling her to get lost. I don't think I've ever done anything else to her." Feng's words stupefied the long-haired man. He never thought that Feng would be so ruthless as to pull such stunts with the Feng family's lady. It would be strange if Feng Shihan didn't try to take Feng's life. However, when Feng Shihan arrived in front of Feng, she looked at him and asked quietly, "Can I speak with you in private?" Immediately, be it the long-haired man or the other men present, They all couldn't help staring at Feng with wide eyes. What was going on here? Chapter 2885, Sword Saint Black Flame? Feng couldn't help taking a closer look at Feng Shihan when he heard her words. Currently, Feng Shihan looked slightly frilier than the last time he saw her. She also no longer exuded the imposing aura of before, although the ambition in her eyes still burned bright. Just the two of us. Feng stole a glance at the robust Matt, and an elderly man standing among the group of superpower representatives. This elderly man possessed a powerful life force. He was absolutely a Grandmaster-level expert. Moreover, judging by how respectfully Matt was behaving around this elderly man, it was easy to guess that the elderly man held an eminent position in mythology. He should be a guild elder at the very least. However, seeing as Feng Shihan was asking for a private conversation, Feng could tell that Feng Shihan had her own thoughts, and that these thoughts did not align with mythology's plans. That's right, just the two of us. Feng Shihan nodded, then glanced at the long-haired man beside Feng and smiled sweetly, saying, "Of course, you can bring someone with you. However, it's not my fault if our relationship gets exposed." The long-haired man immediately revealed a look of shock and confusion when he heard Feng Shihan's words. Feng Shihan was the young lady of a major corporation. According to rumor, she was even an upper zone resident. In addition, not only did she possess a divine level of beauty, but she was even a vice guild leader of mythology. Countless talented young men wished to get close to her, but never got the opportunity to do so. She had an air of indifference even when dealing with Zero Wing's big shots like Cola. Nevertheless, she was taking the initiative to seek out Feng. Her friendly behavior with Feng made the long-haired man doubt if she was even the same person as before. Who is this guy? Questions filled the long-haired man's mind as he looked at Feng. However, after snapping out of his daze, he gazed at Feng with anticipation shining in his eyes. Feng Shihan was an individual of high status. If he could get close to her by even a little bit, even if he were only a third wheel, this achievement would earn him bragging rights for the rest of his life. Alright, just the two of us then. Feng nodded, ignoring the hopeful look the long-haired man was giving him. Feng Shifan was not at all surprised by Feng's response. She pointed at a maglev limousine nearby and said, "Let's talk in my car then. Nobody will bother us there." Zero Wing's battle at Ancient Rock City had thoroughly shaken God's domain. Zero Wing City's public opening also allowed Zero Wing to rake in tons of wealth and resources every day. The resources earned even included the 7 luminaries crystal that the upper zone's various forces sought to obtain. The city was so tempting that even the 5 great super guilds had designs on it, let alone Feng Shihan. Zero Wing was currently rejecting all partnership offers for Zero Wing City, choosing to monopolize all of the city's benefits. The various superpowers could not get even the smallest cut of this juicy pie. To make matters worse, none of the superpowers could do anything about this situation. However, Feng Shihan was confident she could accomplish what the various superpowers couldn't. With her family's position and resources in the upper zone, she should be able to get Zero Wing to agree to a partnership. After all, Feng was currently in a lot of trouble because he had offended a mental strength master. Although Feng lived in a different upper zone from Fujiozhong, the mental strength master had plenty of means to deal with him. Among the organizations operating within the 3 upper zones based in the country, those capable of protecting Feng numbered very few. The Feng family just so happened to be one of them. When Feng saw the maglev limousine, a hint of envy appeared in his eyes. This limousine was a global limited edition, and it was constructed with a top-tier alloy used for spacecraft. This alloy not only had excellent sound insulation properties, but could even withstand missile strikes. He had thought of buying one for Zero Wing, but lacked the connection to do so. Nodding, Feng said, "Sure, let's get in the car." "In that case, this way please, Guild Leader Black Flame." Feng Shihan smiled and took the initiative to lead Feng to the limousine. Her words left the long-haired man stupefied. "He's the guild leader?" The long-haired man stared at Feng's back with wide eyes. When he recalled how he had treated Feng like a little brother, He suddenly felt faint. After all, Black Flame's name in God's domain was synonymous with a killing god. He would create rivers of blood because of a disagreement. He had even killed one of mythology's legendary figures without hesitation. The long-haired man wasn't the only one stunned by this revelation. The young men and women in queue also took some time to process this information. He's guild leader Black Flame? No way. He's that sword saint. Don't the rumors say that guild leader Black Flame is a man in his 30s? That guy looks no more than 22 or 23. Apart from Zero Wing's executives and a portion of the guild's core members, the only other people who knew Black Flame's actual identity and appearance in the real world were the various superpowers executives. The average player was unaware that Black Flame was only a disguise. You really know how to keep a low profile, guild leader Black Flame. Even the internal members of your own guild don't know who you are, Feng Shihan said, smiling when she looked back and saw the long-haired man's pale complexion. That guy will probably lose sleep for the next several days. Feng rolled his eyes at Feng Shihan. Feng Shihan knew that the long-haired man was unaware of his identity as Black Flame, and had deliberately revealed his identity to mess with the man. However, when Feng and Feng Shihan were roughly 10 steps from the limousine, Feng suddenly stopped and turned to the crowd in the plaza. Guild leader Black Flame? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Feng Shihan was a little confused by Feng's actions. She followed Feng's gaze and looked toward the plaza. Although there were well over 1,000 people crowded in the plaza, Feng Shihan faintly sensed killing intent from that direction. Moreover, there wasn't just one source of killing intent but more than a dozen. This killing intent was well hidden. If one weren't a half-step Grandmaster expert or above, one would have difficulty noticing it. This can't be. That side is already taking action. Feng Shihan frowned. Only the Infinity Master Fu Jiuzhong could mobilize so many powerful experts. She whispered to Feng, Guild leader Black Flame, they should be experts the Infinity Master sent. The other side has a significant advantage in numbers. It's best if we pretend we didn't notice them and get into the car quickly. Even if it's them, they can't do anything against my car. A force of over a dozen half-step Grandmasters or above was indeed powerful. However, against the global limited edition limousine, even these experts could only lament their lack of strength. This was also why many major corporations wished to purchase this limousine. However, only 100 people in the world actually managed to get their hands on one. No, there's no need for that, Feng said, shaking his head. He then began walking toward the plaza. I initially planned to ignore them, but since they came all the way here, I'll deal with them now. It's annoying to have them constantly buzzing me like flies. Chapter 2886, Mental Strength Master? When Feng Shihan saw Feng slowly making his way to the plaza, she was stunned. She never thought Feng would confront the enemy. The enemy had over a dozen half-step Grandmaster experts, or better, on their side. Among the sources of killing intent she sensed, a few even struck fear into her. Facing so many experts of such caliber, even a Honglian Grandmaster would suffer miserably. This crazy bastard. Feng Shihan gritted her teeth and followed after Feng. She was the Feng family's young lady. Even the upper zone's organizations would have to show her some respect. If she stood up for Feng, the other party wouldn't dare go too far lest they incur the Feng family's wrath. However, before Feng Shihan could catch up to Feng, 14 people in the crowd approached him. They had concealed their auras so well that they looked no different from ordinary pedestrians. None of the people around them paid them any attention. Kid, since you're so eager to die, I'll grant you your wish, Elder Qi said when he saw that Feng had already walked into the crowd. Sneering, he commanded, everyone attack. If Feng had chosen to remain somewhere with little foot traffic, they would quickly get noticed by others if they took action. However, it was a different story in a crowded location like this plaza. With their standards, they could attack Feng without anyone noticing. By the time the bystanders realized what was going on, they would have long since left the scene. The distance between both sides continuously shortened. 30 meters, 20 meters, 10 meters. When the two sides were less than 3 meters apart, one Honglian Grandmaster, one neutralizing Grandmaster, and 4 half-step Grandmasters began walking straight toward Feng. The 6 experts continued moving like ordinary pedestrians, with the 4 half-step Grandmasters even chatting merrily like close friends. Nobody could tell that these 6 experts were approaching Feng with hostile intentions. When the 4 half-step Grandmasters were within 1 meter of Feng, both the 4 half-step Grandmasters and the 2 true Grandmasters took action simultaneously, so fast that ordinary people couldn't even see their afterimages. The 6 experts launched punches, palm strikes, and claw strikes. Aimed at Feng's vitals, their attacks did not create even the slightest ripple in the air. Although the 6 experts had different strength levels, their coordination was perfect, and they moved as if they were of one body. Feng Shihan's complexion darkened at this scene. If she were in Feng's shoes, she could, at best, stop 2 or 3 attacks. The rest would land on her without fail. It might be a different story if a Honglian Grandmaster received these attacks, but Feng was only a neutralizing Grandmaster. He would most definitely die if he received all these attacks. However, when the 6 experts' attacks were about to land, Feng's body suddenly twitched and moved like flowing water. As if his various body parts had a mind of their own, they instinctively dodged the 6 experts' attacks. Feng's movements were so fine that he dodged some attacks with less than half a centimeter to spare. B/B, the 6 experts were startled by this outcome. However, before they could launch another round of attacks, Feng casually scraped his shoulder past one of them and bumped into another. He then executed a punch, an elbow strike, a palm strike, and a kick against his other 4 opponents. The next moment, the 2 Grandmasters and 4 half-step Grandmasters stiffened and stopped moving. They stood still among the crowd like statues. When Feng had walked 3 meters away, the 6 experts' eyes rolled back, and their bodies collapsed to the ground. How is this possible? Feng Shihan's eyes widened, and her jaw dropped at this scene. Of the 6 experts, 2 were bona fide Grandmasters, one of them a Honglian Grandmaster. Yet, Feng had taken care of these experts in the blink of an eye. The fight had ended so quickly that she didn't even see what had happened. She might have been able to accept such an outcome if the 2 Grandmasters were both neutralizing Grandmasters. With internal force, Feng could knock them out instantly when his attacks connected. However, knocking out a Honglian Grandmaster in one hit was an incredibly difficult feat otherwise. Honglian Grandmasters wouldn't be renowned as troublesome opponents. Feng Shihan wasn't the only person shocked by this situation. Elder Qi and the other experts similarly tensed up at this scene. Even they were incapable of defeating Honglian Grandmasters in one hit. While Feng might have employed a dirty tactic, there was no denying that he had felled a Honglian Grandmaster in one hit. The remaining experts turned to Elder Qi to seek his opinion on the matter. Elder Qi was their leader this time. He also possessed incredible strength, being slightly stronger than even the well-known Wang Xianming. If Elder Qi chose not to attack now, they naturally did not need to attack either. After all, Feng's display of strength just now had thoroughly stunned them. Feng's feat was even more unbelievable than a person killing an elephant with one punch. Seeing Feng approaching their group, Elder Qi gritted his teeth and advanced. Although Elder Qi didn't know what method Feng employed just now, he was confident he could stop any neutralizing Grandmaster's attack. After all, his mental strength was just a tad short of the mental strength master level. His perception and sixth sense were both much stronger than the average Honglian Grandmasters. All tricks were useless against him. When the other experts saw Elder Qi moving, they quickly followed after him. However, their mentality toward Feng was completely different from before. Now they had ramped up their vigilance to the max. Elder Qi's group of 8 split up and approached Feng from 8 different directions. They occasionally used the crowd to conceal their bodies and obscure their movements from Feng. However, Feng remained unfazed and continued approaching Elder Qi casually. What arrogance! Do you think I'll fall for your tricks like those fools? Elder Qi accelerated his footsteps when he saw Feng's indifference, not wanting to give Feng any more time to observe and prepare. With 6 Grandmasters in their group of 8, they could give even a mental strength master a headache if they attacked together. After all, a mental strength master's physical fitness was only slightly superior to theirs. What made mental strength masters powerful was their perception of danger and their control over their bodies. However, when Elder Qi was less than 6 meters away from Feng, he suddenly lost sight of Feng. He disappeared? Elder Qi was stunned as he stared at the spot Feng disappeared from. Feng had vanished not only from his vision, but also from his perception. Elder Qi and the 7 other experts immediately began looking around frantically, searching for Feng. Several seconds later, Elder Qi suddenly noticed a figure walking past him, and he was stunned once more. Feng? However, before Elder Qi could turn around, he felt a stinging pain in his chest. He then found his body paralyzed, and his vision darkened as if death had come for him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. When Elder Qi saw Feng disappearing past him, a thought appeared in his mind, and fear surfaced on his face. Mental Strength Master. Apart from Feng being a mental strength master, Elder Qi couldn't think of any other explanation for this situation. After all, only a mental strength master could evade his perception. However, before Elder Qi could warn the others, he noticed Feng walking past his approaching companions, one after another. Unlike himself though, his companions didn't even notice Feng. And after Feng passed them, their bodies abruptly stiffened. It was evident that they had suffered a similar fate to his. In the end, Elder Qi could only watch helplessly as his companions collapsed one after another. Chapter 2887. Powerful Mental Strength Master. When Elder Qi and the others collapsed, one after another, in the plaza, they quickly attracted the attention of the surrounding people. The small plaza grew noisy for a time as the passers-by gathered around these collapsed experts and discussed among themselves. Feng exited the crowd in the meantime, his departure going entirely unnoticed. He had practically zero presence, as if he was no different from the roadside trees and bushes. He's a mental strength master. Shock filled Feng Shihan's eyes as she switched her gaze between Feng and Elder Qi's group. She felt like her world had just come crashing down on her. Apart from Feng being a mental strength master, she could think of no other explanation for how he had defeated a force of 8 grandmasters and 6 half-step grandmasters so easily. Despite knowing this, Feng Shihan still couldn't bring herself to believe Feng was a mental strength master. Mental strength masters were big shots even in the upper zone, and every one of them lived in the middle layer. Numerous organizations based in the upper zone tried to curry favor with these individuals. All of these powerhouses had reached the level of a mental strength master only in their 30s or later. On the other hand, how old was Feng now? Not to mention, according to Feng Shihan's investigations, when Feng first entered the upper zone several weeks ago, the Green God Company had evaluated his mental strength as special grade only. He had still been a long distance from master grade. When Feng arrived in front of Feng Shihan, she finally snapped out of her daze. She then scrutinized him as if she was meeting him for the first time. Has your mental strength reached the master level already? Feng Shihan asked despite herself. Although she was already certain Feng was a mental strength master, she still couldn't believe that someone could reach this level before 25. If news of this matter spread, it would shake the entire upper zone. Even the Green God Company's executives would take an interest in Feng once they learned of his potential. Meanwhile, the Green God Company's executives were existences even mental strength masters wanted to befriend. These executives helmed the various upper zones, individuals standing at the top of the upper zone. I had the fortune of achieving a breakthrough recently. Feng nodded, not bothering to conceal this fact. He then turned to look at the collapsed experts in the plaza, an indescribable feeling appearing in his heart. Previously, when he had first become a mental strength master, he had noticed that his body's physical fitness had improved significantly. The sharpness of his perception had also become far superior to before. However, only after clashing with Elder Qi and the others did Feng realize how powerful and frightening mental strength masters could be. Mental strength masters might be only slightly superior to Honglian grandmasters in physical fitness, but their control over their bodies reached an incredible level. Not only could they control the fine movements of muscles and the physical body, but they could also exert much greater control over their brains. While in combat, Feng had managed to accelerate his thought processes by more than tenfold. In his eyes, Elder Qi and the others had looked like they were moving in slow motion. After including his enhanced perception of his surroundings, let alone dodging the eyesight and senses of several grandmasters, he could even replicate God's domain's void steps momentarily. It was no wonder the upper zone's various organizations feared mental strength masters so much. Feng also felt fortunate that he had been cautious and stayed indoors for the past few weeks. Otherwise, he might have really ended up in trouble. After all, killing a lone grandmaster-level expert was child's play for a mental strength master. Meanwhile, after Feng's admission, Feng Shihan was momentarily at a loss for words. Originally, she had hoped to acquire a portion of Zero Wing City's resources by offering Feng protection. In doing so, she could increase her authority within mythology and solidify her position as the first Vice Guild leader. Now her plan was nothing but a joke. There was no way a mental strength master would fear another mental strength master. More importantly, with how young Feng was, once the Green God Company found out about his achievement, the company would undoubtedly place heavy importance on him. The status he would enjoy at that time would far exceed Fu Jiuzhong's. After all, the Infinity Master was already an old man and showed precious little signs of improvement nowadays. So long as Fu Jiuzhong wasn't a fool, he would give up on revenge against Feng. On the contrary, he might even try to mend his relationship with Feng. After all, the life of mental strength masters in the upper zone's middle layer wasn't as smooth sailing as others thought. Looking at the vacant expression on Feng Shihan's face, Feng asked strangely, "The trouble has been dealt with already. Do you still see a problem in this, Miss Feng?" Feng Shihan recovered from her stupor at Feng's words. Putting away her previous nonchalant attitude, she said respectfully, "You jest, Master Shi. The powers behind those experts will be scared stiff once they hear about your current status and identity. How could they possibly cause you any more problems?" "Is that so?" Feng felt a little awkward when Feng Shihan suddenly spoke to him respectfully. Her passionate gaze, in particular, was as if she had just seen an absolute beauty. It gave him an uncomfortable feeling. "Master Shi, my visit this time isn't for anything significant." After observing Feng a little while longer, Feng Shihan revealed a rare smile and said, "I only wish to partner with Zero Wing on a personal level." "A personal partnership?" Feng wasn't particularly surprised by these words. Calmly he asked, "May I know what kind of partnership you have in mind?" Taking a deep breath, Feng Shihan said solemnly, "I am willing to invest 100 billion into Zero Wing to help develop all of the guild's necessary facilities and territories. Simultaneously, I can also provide 10 reserve slots for the upper zone, and 1,000 bottles of potions of various kinds. I will also bring a large batch of peak experts and over 300 plots of land located in the NPC cities of both the eastern and western continents into Zero Wing." Feng couldn't help being tempted when he heard Feng Shihan's offer. He then asked, "What are your conditions?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. The funding aside, just the 1,000 bottles of various potions, the large batch of peak experts, and 300 plots of land were more than enough to elevate Zero Wing's overall strength by a large margin. Zero Wing would instantly surpass ordinary super guilds. It would be a lie to say this offer didn't tempt him. The lands of the Western continent's NPC cities, in particular, were things Zero Wing needed urgently right now. With these lands, Zero Wing could maximize the use of its intercontinental teleportation array. The guild might even be able to establish a solid foothold on the Western continent in one fell swoop. Seeing the interest in Feng's eyes, Feng Shihan replied, "Simple. Become my backer." Feng was slightly stunned as he looked at Feng Shihan, his mind failing to comprehend her words momentarily. What's going on? Chapter 2888. Zero Wing in an uproar. Feng Shihan couldn't help a smile when she saw Feng's stunned face. She then asked leisurely, Do my conditions confuse you, Master Shi? Indeed a little. Shi Feng nodded. There was no doubt that the Feng family had extraordinary origins. Moreover, Feng Shihan herself was mythology's first vice-guild leader. No matter how he looked at it, the woman already had a boundless future ahead of her. She was an existence nobody in the outside world dared to offend. He might have become a mental strength master, but the benefits he could bring to Feng Shihan were merely limited to the upper zone's commodities. This was also the main reason the upper zone's various organizations bent over backward for mental strength masters. Apart from these trade commodities, he found it hard to imagine what other help Feng Shihan might need from him. I believe you should also understand what it means to own wealth beyond one's capabilities, Master Shi. Sighing, Feng Shihan said slowly. The Feng family used to have a mental strength master. However, along with this master's passing, the Feng family's circumstances in the upper zone have deteriorated. At this point, many of the middle layer's various organizations are even targeting the middle layer reserve slot I own. Hence, I hope you can intervene in this matter for me, Master Shi. If you do, those organizations might back off out of fear. A reserve slot for the middle layer? Shi Feng was startled by Feng Shihan's words. The reserve slots for the upper zone's base layer were already incomparably precious, and they were more than enough to tempt the base layer's various organizations. A reserve slot for the middle layer would be even more precious and tempting. Moreover, based on Feng Shihan's words, this reserve slot was transferable. It didn't bind to specific individuals after use. This reserve slot was countless times more precious than the temporary 3-month slots the base layer's organizations competed for in the contribution competitions. It would be strange if the middle layer's organizations were not interested in acquiring this reserve slot. Master Shi, would you be willing to cooperate? Feng Shihan asked, a hint of apprehension flashing across her eyes as she looked at Shi Feng. Originally, she had already decided to give up on this reserve slot, because she couldn't keep it with mythology's strength. However, an opportunity had presented itself to her now. If she found the help of an ordinary mental strength master, the middle layer's various organizations wouldn't fear her at all. They would still try to snatch her reserve slot without fear. However, it was a different story if the mental strength master were Shi Feng. Shi Feng had become a mental strength master at an unprecedentedly young age. With his potential, the Green God Company was bound to place great importance on him. So long as Shi Feng was willing to stand up for her, she might be able to keep this reserve slot. After Shi Feng gave the matter some thought, he said, "All right, I agree to your conditions. However, I need to add one condition." "Please speak, Master Shi," Feng Shihan responded without hesitation. 100 million trade points. Shi Feng stated. "What are your thoughts on this, Miss Feng?" Apart from the trade points he earned from trading in 7 luminaries crystals to the Green God Company some time ago, he hadn't made any extra points during this period. Meanwhile, apart from life potions, he also needed to spend a lot of trade points while living in the upper zone. This would only increase after he had Fire Dance and the others move into the upper zone. His expenditure of trade points would skyrocket if he had to nurture a mansion full of people. Hence, acquiring trade points was a must. 100 million? After pondering the condition, Feng Shihan gritted her teeth and answered, "No problem. I can transfer them to you through my account." Once Feng Shihan agreed to his extra condition, Shi Feng made his way into Zero Wing's headquarters and signed a contract with her, assuring both sides. After signing the contract, Feng Shihan promptly left Zero Wing's headquarters to make the necessary preparations. She acted decisively and carefully on this matter. Inside the maglev limousine heading to the airport, Vice Guild Leader, do you really intend to follow Shi Feng in the future? White Feather asked as she looked at Feng Shihan, who had her eyes closed and was deep in thought. If you leave the guild so abruptly, the guild won't spare you. Although Shi Feng is now a mental strength master, there are significant differences between mental strength masters. He won't necessarily be able to stop all the organizations operating in the middle layer. If he handles things poorly, you'll not only lose your reserve slot, but also have to face the guild's retaliation. Mythology was one of the 5 great super guilds. Some of the upper zone organizations that had partnered with the guild because of God's domain had the support of powerful and high-ranking mental strength masters. Feng Shihan was mythology's first vice guild leader. Her abrupt departure from mythology would deal a massive blow to the guild's reputation and morale. Mythology would seek revenge for this matter, both in God's domain and in the upper zone. I don't have a choice. This is my last chance. Feng Shihan replied with a wry smile. If I continue waiting, I'll lose the reserve slot for sure. Once that happens, I doubt I can get it back, even if a powerful mental strength master stands up for me. I can only pray that Feng is capable of fending off those greedy organizations now. Even mental strength masters had extreme difficulty securing one middle-layer reserve slot, and they treated these slots like family heirlooms. After all, these slots could allow a person to live in the middle layer unconditionally. If she couldn't retain this reserve slot, her chances of becoming a mental strength master were practically zero. In the upper zone's history, the people capable of becoming a mental strength master without ever setting foot into the upper zone's middle layer were few and far between. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that 99% of the mental strength masters that had ever walked this world became mental strength masters only after living in the middle layer for some time. While Feng Shihan was making her way back to the upper zone, news of Elder Qi's group getting crippled reached Yuantian City's upper zone, shocking the various organizations based there. None of these organizations ever thought that Feng possessed such frightening strength. He had single-handedly fended off the encirclement of so many Grandmaster-level experts. This unexpected development prompted many organizations looking to sell the Infinity Master a favor to shrink back. What should we do, young master? The organizations in Haitian cities and Yuantian cities' upper zones are no longer willing to assist us. Ikue asked worriedly after calling Lu Tiandi. Moreover, now that Feng's prestige has increased, many organizations are considering partnering with him to acquire 7 Luminaries crystals from Zero Wing. I understand. Withdraw from Yuantian City's upper zone for now, Lu Tiandi said, smiling faintly. Teacher has learned about this situation. He'll most likely personally cripple Feng. All we need to do now is sit back and watch. Yes, sir. Ikue grew joyful when he heard Lu Tiandi's words. If Fu Jiuzhong personally took action, then everything would be fine. Once Zero Wing no longer had Feng backing it, Starlink would have a much easier time annexing Zero Wing. Fenglan City, Zero Wing Tower. Along with Feng's return, excitement filled Zero Wing's members, particularly the experts who had joined Zero Wing only recently. The reason for everyone's excitement was Feng's awarding life potions to Fire Dance and a dozen other core executives in front of all of the guild's internal members. Afterward, he had announced that he would award those internal members who performed excellently with life potions. They even had the opportunity to enter the upper zone. This announcement threw the entire headquarters into an uproar. The upper zone was a dreamland countless people wished to enter, let alone living in the upper zone. They usually didn't even dare dream of entering the upper zone. This was because the upper zone was a place only a select few organizations in the world could come into contact with. Ordinary civilians like themselves had no chance of entering the upper zone. However, the impossible had now become possible. Guild leader, is this really fine? Fire Dance asked worriedly when she saw the new reward system. In the new reward system, a Tier 4 internal member that successfully raised their mana body's completion rate to 110% would receive 3 bottles of life potion. Afterward, they would receive 1 bottle for every subsequent percent of improvement. If they reached 115%, they would receive another 3 bottles. There was also a reward for concentration standards. After one reached the Tier 4 basic concentration standard, every increase in rank would net them 1 phantom potion, 3 bottles if they reached the Tier 4 peak standard, and 10 bottles if they reached the Tier 5 standard. As for combat standards, internal members would receive 1 life potion if they reached the Void Realm and 3 bottles if they reached the Domain Realm. Most importantly, anyone in the guild who got promoted to Tier 5 would get to live in the upper zone with 100% certainty. Setting aside the upper zone's residency, just the reward of the various potions was already plenty absurd. Others might not understand how precious these potions were, But Fire Dance knew that these potions were available only in limited quantities. Relax. There won't be a problem, Feng said, chuckling. On the contrary, I hope more people can claim the rewards. The life potion was of significant help for improving a person's physical fitness. Meanwhile, if Zero Wing wished to develop quickly, it wouldn't do for the guild to rely solely on him. Zero Wing needed at least several Grandmaster-level experts under its command. Only then would it no longer have to fear the provocation of other forces. Hence, he needed to increase the rewards for Zero Wing's internal members. By doing so, he could also raise the motivation of Zero Wing's members, and the chances of producing Void Realm experts and Domain Realm experts. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Moreover, with the life potions he provided, Fire Dance and Master Lei Bao would break through to the Grandmaster level in a few days. This was especially true for Fire Dance, who had already reached the Domain Realm in the realms of refinement, and the Ascension Realm in the realms of truth. She only lacked a bit of inspiration, and a boost to her brain activity to become a neutralizing Grandmaster. Afterward, Feng discussed the guild's rapid development with Fire Dance and the guild's other executives. Dealing with the Outer World Forces invasion wasn't an easy task. If handled poorly, the guild might lose Silverwing City and Ancient Rock City. One day went by quickly. It's about time I returned to the game. After taking a look at his watch, Feng drank a life potion, lay down in the virtual gaming cabin in his bedroom, and logged into God's domain. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.